21. Before setting sail, Vic held up two fingers, his eyes glittering like twin stars, a sly grin spreading across his face. First, he wiggled one finger. Bianca, our resident siren, is racing too. I hear she's been champion for years. Aren't you tired of looking at that smug face? He leaned toward Wednesday, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial purr. Don't you want to pull her off that ridiculous throne and drag her through the mud? Just imagine that flawless expression cracking. Delicious. Wednesday's eyebrow twitched almost imperceptibly. The image of Bianca humiliated did, in fact, assemble itself into a small, darkly satisfying tableau in her mind. Vic saw the opportunity and wiggled his second finger. Second, and more importantly, I found out the Poe Cup winners don't just get a year of bragging rights and glory. He stretched the word, watching Wednesday's reaction. They also get a very practical perk, off-campus privileges. Think about it, Miss Addams. More lenient leave, more time to investigate. His fox-like grin said he had just baited her perfectly. Wednesday was silent. Her gaze swept his triumphant smile, Enid's tearful, hopeful face, and Venom's huge white eyes, which seemed to be enjoying the brewing chaos. Cold logic told her this was a terrible idea. A primitive, muddy competition filled with gaudy trappings and shouty rivals, teamed with this ragtag group of lunatics? Absurd. But crushing Bianca and that key phrase, off-campus privileges, opening up wider investigative freedom, her fingertips flexed without her meaning to. Filling seats? She said finally, her voice colder than a winter cell. Sarcasm dripped from every syllable. Sitting in that garishly painted aesthetic-free coffin and waiting to be sacrificed like an idiot? Her gaze snapped to Enid. If I'm going to be dragged into this farce, everything will be done my way. That includes, but is not limited to, modifications to the boat, route selection, and methods for dealing with competitors. She paused, then delivered the verdict Vic had been praying for and Enid had been begging for. I'm in. Vic burst into an excited cheer and nearly lunged to hug her, only to stop under the lethal glare. Instead, he flung his arms around Enid, who was sobbing happy tears into her hands and smiling like the sun. Yes! Wednesday! Thank you. You're the best. Wednesday added without expression, do not misunderstand. This is simply the optimal outcome based on a cost-benefit analysis. If any of you slow me down or get mud on my clothes, I will not hesitate to throw you into the lake for the mutant fish. Of course, of course. Enid nodded frantically, ready to agree to anything under this tone. You're the captain. We'll follow you. Exactly, Vic crowed. Our Gothic captain. Our destination, the stars and the sea, and Bianca's tear-streaked, humiliated face. Venom, stretched taut and lazy, added, and turning the other teams into our chocolate reserves. Wednesday ignored the last remark. She inhaled as if bracing for the inevitable chaos and misery of the coming days. Strange even to her, beneath the familiar annoyance there was a faint, stubborn flicker of something she preferred to pretend wasn't there. Eagerness. She walked to her desk, fetched paper and pen, her voice regaining its chill, pragmatic cadence. First, we redesigned the Black Cat. In its present state, aside from the stupidly bright paint, it's useless. Her pen touched paper. Lines appeared, crisp and sure. Reinforce the frame. Add concealed attack points. Maybe a retractable ram. There are no rules, after all. She lifted her head, a cold smile barely curving one corner of her mouth. Then we'll make our own rules. Outside, night lay heavy over the lake. Inside the dorm, a strange little fleet, an impossibly Gothic girl, a manic boy, a rainbow-furred werewolf, and a chocolate-loving symbiote, prepared to put to sea. Their goals: win a race, humiliate a rival, and earn off-campus freedom. Along the way, they might well stir up a storm of bloodshed. Very Nevermore. The Harvest Festival's warmth still ghosted the campus, but the Black Lake dock had already been claimed by a different fever. The annual Poe Cup canoe race crackled in the air. The smell, lake fish, fresh paint, the dry heat of adrenaline, and a faint, metallic whiff, perhaps a souvenir from some previous pratfall. Several garishly painted canoes bobbed like stranded sea monsters. Competitors clamored in team colors, taunting, warming up, making threats. One boat drew every eye, the completely remade Black Cat. Wednesday had painted over the rainbow garishness with matte black, white claw marks ripped in a single sweep from bow to stern, like a thing that had escaped the maw of some dark behemoth. The crew stood by, performing final preparations, or enduring them. "Oh my gosh, you look so cute. Why not stick on some whiskers, too?" Enid chirped at Wednesday, who had emerged from a temporary changing tent like a small freeze. Enid wore the team uniform snugly, a cat ear headband perched on her head. Grease paint whiskers decorated her cheeks. She radiated boundless nervous energy. Wednesday wore the same black cut, the fabric outlining her lithe, powerful frame. Atop her head, however, sat an incongruous cat ear headdress, a ridiculous accessory that clashed with her entire aesthetic. Her face, meanwhile, seemed to wish the world would simply end. The cold that radiated off her made the surrounding air several degrees cooler. "If you make one more comment about my attire," she said, each word like an icicle, "I will let you personally discover why 9 lives are not enough for a cat." "Hey, not fair," a deep voice complained. Venom separated from Vic, coalescing into a huge muscular shape, and pointed at their uniforms. "Why don't I get a uniform? I want cat ears too." Enid looked up at the hulking symbiote and apologized with theatrical sincerity. "Sorry, Venom. We really couldn't find a uniform that would fit your majestic figure." She fluttered her hands, genuinely regretful. Venom glanced down at its own broad chest and powerful limbs and muttered, "Maybe I should cut back on chocolate." At that moment, the other end of the black tendril linking to Venom twitched, and Vic finally emerged from another tent. The instant he stepped into the dock's small circle of light, conversation seemed to pause, and the air went still for a beat. 22. An axe must be chopped vertically. It had to be admitted, Vic carried a disarming kind of handsomeness that his usual mania, rumpled school uniform, and perpetually tousled hair normally obscured. Now, in a tailored black competition uniform, his lithe, upright frame was fully on display. The messy hair looked deliberately tousled, lending him a hint of wildness instead of sloppiness. Sunlight fell across a face of sharp, almost sculpted features. Clean jawline, the corners of his mouth faintly upturned, poised to deliver either a joke or something shocking. Only when his eyes skittered about, their quick, leaping light and the barely restrained madness in their depths, did the image dissolve back into the dangerous brightness beneath the charm. Even Wednesday had to concede, with the most objective, anatomical eye, that his bone structure and muscle definition were a masterpiece. That made the rebellious organ in her chest stir. Damn it, she ought to get checked in the infirmary after the race, she thought. "Hey, what's up?" Vic noticed the sudden hush and the way people were staring. He looked himself over, then flicked the small gold bell at his collar. It chimed a crisp ding. "Doesn't it look good?" he asked. Enid's face went incandescent. She couldn't meet his eyes. It's amazing," she stammered. "Thanks for the compliment. Meow." Vic winked and preened, lips curving into a wicked, brilliant smile. A bright spur of blood pulsed from Enid's nose. She yanked a tissue to it and tilted her head back. Wednesday clenched her fists and forced herself to look away, breathing slow to suppress the sudden, irrational thudding in her chest. Arrhythmia, she told herself. She would deal with it after the race. "On your marks," the starter's voice boomed, snapping the strange pause like a whip. Teams sprang into motion and boarded their boats. Wednesday leapt aboard the number, 4 canoe first, and took the stern as helmsman. Her eyes sharpened, shifting into tactical focus as they scanned the lake. Vic followed with a grin and hopped into the middle, positioning himself in front of her. Venom, massive in appearance but not necessarily as heavy as it looked, assumed its place. Enid climbed in last, pressing the tissue to her nose. Her cheeks were flushed as she took the bow. To port sat Bianca Barclay's number 2. Yellow paint and black beetle patterns marked the hull. Bianca herself had on a tailored yellow uniform. She glanced back at number 4 and its crew, a thin smirk of contempt on her face. Wednesday's gaze went razor sharp. "Listen," she said, low but clear enough for the 3 of them and the symbiote to hear. "One objective, crush team number 2 and be first across the finish. Anything that happens along the way is an accident. Understood?" "Understood, Captain." Enid snapped to, the werewolf in her suddenly hot with competitive blood. "For chocolate," Venom growled. Vic tugged at his bell. Its clear ring chimed again. He looked back at Wednesday, eyes bright with an almost feral excitement that matched hers. "Let them hear our bells, Captain." The starting pistol cracked. Several canoes lunged forward, oars cutting the water as crews rowed hard for the island in the lake's center. The shot's echo still shimmered over Black Lake as curses, shouts, and the clatter of hulls turned the water into a roiling chaos. No four moved like a shadow through the turmoil. Wednesday planted her hands on the steering oar, watching the front like a general searching for a weakness. "Hard to port. Avoid that herd of charging rhinos," she called, voice cool and precise, slicing through the noise. Enid rode at the bow with brutal, efficient power. Spray beaded in her short golden hair as each stroke drove the boat forward. Vic's technique was oddly musical, sometimes quick, sometimes languid, a mad rhythm that nonetheless proved efficient. Venom had merged its lower body with the hull, throwing a dozen black tendrils into the water and churning them like living paddles. The canoe picked up speed. "This is amazing," Venom rumbled, eyes fixed on Bianca's yellow hull ahead. "Like stirring a giant chocolate milkshake, though the taste is off." A purple canoe, the Pit and the Pendulum, cut a sharp turn toward number 4. With a metallic click, long-handled axes sprang from both sides of its hull and, using the centrifugal swing, swept horizontally at number 4 like pendulums of doom. "Duck!" Wednesday barked, dropping down before the axes could hit. Enid flattened herself instinctively and disappeared against the bottom of the boat. Vic gave a theatrical cry and leaned back so far his shoulders slammed into Wednesday. She planted a knee into his lower back and stopped him. "Maintain distance, Vic," she snapped, teeth barely clenched. She couldn't understand why the mere proximity of this human heat source made her body betray her. Arrhythmia, an odd flush, utterly infuriating. "Ura, so thrilling," Vic crowed, unbothered by being shoved. From his reclined position, he swung his oar wildly, nearly catching Enid's head. "Hey, watch it," she snapped, dodging. "Enid, port mechanism, deploy the lance," Wednesday ordered, trying to impose tactical order on the scramble. "Wait, let me." Venom's voice was a tangle of excitement and hunger. It watched the axes like a predator watching toys. Then, horrifying the crew of the Pit and the Pendulum, Venom shifted more of itself away from Vic. A thick black tendril coalesced, hardened, and reshaped. Under stunned, terrified eyes, Venom's arm transformed into a massive, dark battle axe, larger than the purple boat itself. The blade shimmered with a menacing matte gleam. "Ha ha ha!" Venom laughed, a sound edged with pure destructive glee. "An axe! It's got to be swung vertically to pack a punch. No finesse, no technique, just raw force." Venom hauled the axe high and brought it crashing down straight at the Pit and the Pendulum. "No!" the other crew screamed. A sick, splintering crack echoed. The axe bit through the hull like a hot knife through butter, cleaving the canoe cleanly in two. Water poured in. Wreckage sank in seconds. Contestants went down coughing and thrashing, their faces drained of color as they stared at number 4 as if it harbored monsters. The Pit and the Pendulum was out of the race. 23. Warlike competition. A sudden, deathly silence fell over the arena. The lake, which had been roaring and splashing a moment before, seemed to freeze. The other canoe crews, who had been busy tripping one another up, stopped mid-stroke, staring in stunned disbelief at the boat that had been cleanly split in two, and at the black thing that had just withdrawn a giant axe, resumed its ordinary shape, and licked its lips as if it had enjoyed the moment. Nobody knew who gasped first. Then, as if on cue, the two boats that had been trying to close on the Black Cat, Murder of Crows and Red Death, acted as if they'd seen a ghost. Their helmsmen spun the rudders desperately, and the rowers paddled backward frantically, putting as much distance between them and that dangerous patch of water as they could. Their faces said it all. "We're out." "Good luck, you lot." For an instant, an eerie no-man's land opened around the Black Cat. "Wow!" Vic blinked, looking at Venom with new admiration. "Buddy, you've got to be a pro at chopping wood." Venom snorted proudly, its huge white eyes narrowed. "Next time, we should try splitting something harder." Wednesday forced herself to breathe, to push past the raw, brutal image. She glanced at the boats, giving them a wide berth, and at the golden beetle ahead, which had also begun to accelerate. "Target unchanged," she said, regaining her usual cold calm, though anyone listening closely might have detected the tiniest edge of excitement under the frost. "Full speed ahead. Run them over." Like a black arrow loosed from a bow, the Black Cat cut through the water straight toward that bright patch of yellow. Venom was clearly thrilled. Chopping and smashing had ignited something in it. Its white eyes glittered with a wild light, as it suddenly jabbed one tentacle at Vic and, with the glee of a creature discovering a new toy, chirped, "Hey bro, can I use that right now? This is perfect." Vic was stunned for a beat, then a grin snapped across his face like a switch. Maniacal and bright, his eyes matched Venom's. "Oh, great idea, you genius," he laughed, his voice whipped by the lake wind. "If not now, when?" Venom wiggled, a black, viscous sack of mischief. Then it spat several round black objects into its outstretched palm. It coiled a few with its own tentacles and shoved the rest into Vic's arms. "Hey, girls, want some? Let's play together," it called, offering the dangerous spheres to a frozen Wednesday and Enid, shaking the black orbs as if they were party favors. Enid's hair rose on the back of her neck. A chill ran up to the crown of her head. Hand grenades? Even in a no-rules contest, this was too far. Were they trying to blow Black Lake sky high? Don't worry. Vic, seeing their terror, explained breezily, as if commenting on the weather, while he deftly pulled a pin from one of the spheres. Homemade. Cocoa powder, potassium nitrate, sugar, plus a bit of my secret ingredient. Very, very low yield, more like a big firecracker. Mostly for the bang. Scare people. Before the sentence was finished, his arm swung in a practice throw. Whoosh! Boom! The black sphere arced and hit the water less than 5 meters behind the Red Death. A dull, terrifying explosion rocked the air. A column of water shot up 2 or 3 meters, then rained down, drenching everyone on the Red Death. Their strokes went wild, their boat began to spin. Vic and Venom cocked their heads and watched the effect. Maybe the potassium nitrate ratio was a tad high? Vic mused, scratching his chin. Perfect, Venom roared, delighted. That's the right kick. I don't see anything low yield about that. Enid found her voice, shrieking through tears. Wednesday's face had gone beyond icy. It was a deadly, silent calm ready to snap. Her hands gripped the steering oar so hard her knuckles cracked. This was worse than the military-grade grenades she'd used for fishing outside the manor. Small workshops could really build this stuff. She wanted to stop them, but it was too late. Vic and Venom, having taken that murderous permission as an invitation, were like two huskies loose at a carnival. Watch this. Ha ha! Over there, murder of crows. Get a heavenly shower. Take this, chocolate-flavored depth charge. After that, the throws came fast. Boom, boom. The lake looked like it was under bombardment. Columns of water erupted one after another, booms rolling across the surface. The other crews lost their heads. The contest had turned into a full-scale amphibious assault. No, a bloody reenactment of the Normandy landings. Survival instinct overrode the desire to win. Every boat that could move pushed at top speed to escape the Black Cat. Faces were no longer competitive. They were pure primal terror at the two maniacs and their monster that produced weapons out of thin air. "They're madmen," someone yelled. A member of the Murder of Crows bawled as he rode. "I'm done with this competition. I quit. Mom, save me." Order dissolved into chaos. The arena flooded with explosions, screams, and the rising hysterical laughter of Vic and Venom. The crowd on the stands had gone silent. The cheers and shouts vanished. Spectators, including teachers and headmistress Larissa Weems, were frozen, mouths open, staring at the war movie spectacle on the lake, the pitch-black boat lobbing makeshift shells, the geysers that punctured the water, and the other canoes scattering for cover. Many faces were blank, stunned. This had long since ceased to be a no-rules competition. This was on the scale of a terror attack. Headmistress Larissa stood in the center of the viewing platform, silver-gray eyes narrowed as she watched the Black Cat's havoc. Her face was unreadable. Only the faint tightening at the corners of her mouth hinted at an emotion that looked a lot like a headache. On board the Black Cat, Vic yanked another pin and pointed at the yellow patch ahead, Bianca's golden beetle, jerking along in sheer panic. "Hey, Captain," he called back to Wednesday, his face lit with a childish, destructive joy. "Next target?" Wednesday looked at the devastation they'd created, at opponents crying for their parents, at Vic's expectant, praise-seeking grin, and at an eager Venom. She was silent for 2 seconds. Then she spoke slowly, each word precise and cold. "Aim better. Don't waste ammunition." Bianca's teeth sank into her lower lip until it almost bled. Her slender, deceptively powerful arms tensed as she rode the wooden oars with everything she had. Their canoe cut frantically across the roiling black lake, trying to outrun the relentless, chocolate-scented rain of explosives behind them. She was past sure she was being singled out. After the first 7 or 8 grenades had been distributed near the other teams, almost every remaining one had been aimed at her boat. The whistling black spheres, the thunderous detonations, the spray of muddy water soaking them, everything felt like a deliberate, personal torture. Boom. Another grenade detonated just off the stern. The shockwave slammed the boat forward. The hull gave a bone-jarring creak as if it might come apart. Bianca and her teammates were thrown about, coughing and swallowing lake water. If their canoe hadn't been built with the unusually sturdy materials mandated for accidents, the repeated blasts would have torn it to pieces. Bianca shook with anger. In past years, she'd won easily because of an arrangement. An underwater ally lay in wait near the finish line. When her opponents neared, that ally would surface and overturn the most dangerous canoes from beneath. No rules, she'd thought, so she'd use them to the fullest. But she hadn't expected this year's crew, a band of lunatics who took no rules as if it were a manual for warfare. Were they even students, or escaped militants from some secret base? She turned her head, eyes blazing toward the shore where her underwater accomplice should be. She sent a frantic glance. Get in the water. Flip them over. Her ally stared at the scene as if he were watching a bombardment from a war movie. Geysering fountains of water, a black boat spitting dangerous spheres. His face went pale. He shook his head so fast it was almost a blur and took a step back, nearly toppling. Coward, Bianca thought with an inward roar. She might have spat blood with how furious she was. Then again, would she have risked it? Against this saturated, indiscriminate firepower, jumping in the water would be suicide. She swung her head back and fixed her glare on the pursuing black boat. Her fury bypassed the 2 maniacal boys hurling explosives and locked onto the Gothic girl standing at the stern, calm as if she were sightseeing. Wednesday Addams. It was all her fault. If the transfer student hadn't shown up, everything would have gone like before. Bianca graceful, victorious, adored. Wednesday Addams! Bianca shouted over the explosions. You'll pay for this! Wednesday barely raised an eyebrow. A faint, almost amused curl touched her lips. Quite spirited, she murmured, as if observing an insect trying to stop a carriage. Then she lifted her voice, flat and authoritative. Vic, our friend needs more. Hospitality. Concentrate fire on their stern. Restrict their maneuvering. Venom, she added, holding out a pale hand. Give me a few. Vic and Venom paused, then their faces lit up with a wild, delighted energy. Yes, Captain. Vic practically cracked. He began hurling grenades faster, aiming at the water behind Bianca's canoe. Venom writhed happily. Several tentacles curled around 3 round black bombs and set them into Wednesday's open palm, turning the pins toward her with careful, eager motions. Here, Captain. Just pull the little tail and throw. Easy. Venom's voice trembled with excitement. No need to teach me. I've been playing with grenades since I was 5. Wednesday turned the cold, sticky sphere in her hand, feeling its weight. She caught the metal pin with her nail and ripped it free. Hiss, the soft escape of gas. Her eyes narrowed, and her arms snapped out in a smooth, powerful motion. The grenade, like a dark-winged thing bent on death, whistled toward the canoe's flank. Wednesday's throw had none of Vic's manic showiness. It was precise, clinical, as if the toss were a piece of dark artistry. Boom! Water geysered up just off the canoe's starboard side. The blast's shock rocked the yellow boat so hard it nearly capsized. Bianca and her teammates screamed, fighting to keep control. A tiny, genuine smile flickered at the corner of Wednesday's mouth, something like the pleasure of the richest, darkest chocolate melting in her chest. She reached for another. Again. Her voice was cool, but in those deep, pool-dark eyes there were new sparks of appetite for destruction. Venom shoved a few more bombs forward. Vic watched, stunned for a second, then howled with even greater glee. Whoa, Captain! You're a genius! I love you! The black boat's firepower spiked instantly. With their captain personally joining in, the pursuit turned from harassment into a hunt, and Bianca's canoe was the prey, tired, soaked, and chased without mercy. Watching the Gothic girl pitch explosives with grim efficiency and the other 2 serving her gleefully, Bianca felt despair closing around her. Then the noise stopped. The roar of explosions faded, leaving only the sound of oars striking water and their own ragged breathing. Bianca's heart jumped. She wheeled around. The black boat was still behind them, but its crew had empty hands. Venom's tentacles no longer spat out dangerous spheres. Vic, bored, was idly twirling the bell at his throat. They were out of grenades. Relief crashed over Bianca like warm sun after a storm. It felt like salvation, a godsend opportunity. 25. A bittersweet feeling and sharp wolf claws. Row, row with everything you've got. Bianca shouted, her voice sharp with the rush of excitement. They're out of ammo. Charge Raven Island. If I'm the first to set foot on the island, run to the center, pull up the flag, and get back in the canoe. Victory is still mine. Bianca Barclay wins. The boat marked 3 seemed injected with a final burst of adrenaline. Every team member tapped into some survival reserve. Their wooden oars moved so fast, they left ghosting afterimages. The canoe surged toward Raven Island, that eerie mass of jagged, misshapen rocks in the center of the lake. Other boats pushed just as hard. Wednesday, Vic said, tilting his head to watch the little yellow boat racing ahead, his voice threaded with confusion and something like regret. Why are you stopping the barrage? Venom still seems to have a few left rattling around his stomach. Venom squirmed obligingly and gurgled, confirming the surplus. Wednesday stood at the stern, hair and black skirt whipping in the lake breeze. She watched Bianca's retreating back as the girl gave her last violent strokes to flee, and the corners of Wednesday's mouth curved into a slow, cold, amused smile. The look sent a fresh chill even through Vic, who knew her well. If we blow them up now, Wednesday said flatly, almost playfully, what will be left to blow up when they come back from the island clutching the flag and brimming with hope? Silence held for a beat. Then, ha! Ha! Vic and Venom exchanged a look and burst into delighted, wicked laughter that hung oddly over the suddenly quiet lake. Vic slapped his thigh, bells jingling. Brilliant, simply brilliant, Captain. This plan is venomous. I love it. Venom licked his teeth in a wet, excited sound. Let hope swell first, then pop. It's better than eating chocolate right out of the box. Enid tightened her grip on her oar and stared at her 3 teammates, all grinning with the same dark, eager expression, and shivered inwardly. She felt oddly out of place among them. Not twisted enough, maybe. The boat bearing the same strange symbol, 8, no longer pressed close. Like a predator that had lost interest, it followed toward Raven Island at an unhurried distance, maintaining an unnerving escort. They moved like executioners, waiting for prisoners to walk willingly to the gallows, waiting for the sweetest moment of despair. That quiet was more suffocating than the continuous explosions had been. The 8 nudged up to shore. The boat's bottom rasped against sand and gravel. Contestants who had already reached the island slumped on the bank, panting and shell-shocked. At the sight of the 8 approaching, 3 figures aboard, plus a black-clad one, they reacted like rabbits seeing a wolf. They bolted and hid, pressed together with wide, primal fear. Wednesday and Vic leaped from the boat in near-perfect sync. I'll get the flag, Wednesday said, already fixed on the narrow path toward the island's center. I'll add a little fun and difficulty to their cross-country trek. Vic and Venom shared a wicked grin. All right, Enid sighed, resigned, clutching her oar. Then I'll wait on the boat. I'll watch our craft so some idiot doesn't come over and cause trouble. Oh, right. Vic seemed to remember something and plunged his hand into Venom's viscous body, rummaging around. Venom gurgled and squirmed. A moment later, Vic pulled out an ostentatious gold desert eagle, all exaggerated angles and violent aesthetics. Take this for self-defense. One of my favorites, he enthused, thrusting the heavy pistol into Enid's hands like a child offering a toy. If some idiot tries to bully you or sabotage the boat, just pew-pew-pew at them, simple and easy to use. Enid stared at the cold, lethal slab of metal and stammered. It's a bit. Vic clapped his forehead. My mistake. That gold luxury edition is tacky. Not your cute, cool vibe at all. He snatched the gold Desert Eagle back in a blur, shoved it into Venom, and immediately produced another pistol. A pink Desert Eagle plastered with rhinestones down the grip. This one's for you, Vic crowed, pressing the blinged-out gun back into Enid's now stiff fingers. I loved this when I was a kid, slept with it sometimes, felt safe. It's perfect for you, sweet and cool. He leaned in conspiratorially. Oh, by the way, I already flipped the safety off. Use it straight away. Don't be shy. Enid's brain felt like it crashed. She stood there, holding the heavy, stylistically schizophrenic pink weapon, and managed a twitchy "thank you." Contestants left on the other boats had watched the whole weapon gifting with open-mouthed horror. They stared at Vic like he'd just been revealed as an international arms dealer. Is this a student? Who carries this around? And in color variants? Wednesday barely glanced at the exchange, uninterested. "Let's go," she said. "Coming. Coming." Vic answered with a grin as Venom retracted. They plunged into the island's depths, moving so fast they were swallowed by thick, twisted trees. The shore fell silent except for the lake lapping the bank. The island carried back faint fragments of conversation on the wind. Wednesday's cool voice, "Can you get me a Benelli M4?" And Vic's eager reply, "Oh, good taste, Captain. After this race, I'll go raid a U.S. military base warehouse and pick one out. Damn, those two really are a perfect match." One of the contestants on the cask of Amontillado, still wearing the shock on his face, muttered that line to his companion. Enid, with sharp hearing and a sudden sourness in her chest, heard it clearly. The casual comment about Vic and Wednesday being a perfect match produced a strange, prickling unhappiness. She pressed her lips together, gripped the pink Desert Eagle, and stepped off the 8 toward the cask of Amontillado. The two men left on that boat immediately went into terrified bluster. "Hey, what do you want?" Enid said nothing. She raised the glaringly pink pistol Vic had given her. Their bravado evaporated. Both men's hands shot up, faces draining of color. Enid didn't look at them. She walked to the side of their canoe and reached out with her free hand, sharp wolf claws snapping out like a reflex. Then, with a long, deliberate sound, she raked the claws across the boat's hull, gouging deep, terrifying scratches near the keel that nearly pierced the planks. The scritch-scritch echoed on the shore. When she was done, she huffed once and, without glancing back at the trembling men, turned and walked back toward the 8. Clutching the pink gun like a small dragon guarding treasure, or perhaps like a little wolf. Only after she had moved away did the two men slowly lower their hands, staring at the shredded bottom of their boat, bereft of tears. "Whoa," one muttered. "That 10 girl is insane. I hope this battered boat holds until we get back." "It's your fault," the other said with a sob. "Why did you have to say they were a perfect match?" "What did I say wrong?" the first protested, feeling grievously wronged. "I was just commenting." In a rare move, Vic didn't stick by Wednesday's side. He let Venom take over, and with several swift bounds, he vanished into Raven Island's dense forest like a streak of black lightning, heading for the island's center. Obstacles seemed not to exist for him. He moved with terrifying speed. Soon, he reached his destination, the Crackstone Crypt. A small clearing surrounded by gnarled ancient trees opened onto a crude stone door carved with the name Joseph Crackstone, standing like a forgotten monument. Dozens of colored flags were planted before it, each one marking a team hungry for victory. Venom-possessed Vic leapt up and sat on top of the stone door. His huge white eyes scanned the empty ground below like a king surveying a stage. Then his head tilted. He inhaled. Earth and decaying leaves filled the air, and beneath them a faint, impossible scent that set every cell on alert. A cold mix of disinfectant, rusting metal, and despair. The smell of a laboratory. A low, interested grunt escaped him as he narrowed those white eyes and studied the door and the surrounding ground. "How interesting," he murmured to Vic within him, or to Venom, who shared his senses, voice full of the pleasure of a predator finding prey. "They've been here. Those beak gentlemen, what were they doing here?" Venom writhed inside and replied, "Doesn't smell like anything good. Reminds me of those experimental things that didn't taste very good." "In any case, they weren't here for a picnic," Vic chuckled, turning his attention back to the upcoming game. "Be patient," he told himself. "Time makes fine wine. But first, let's have a little fun." By the time Bianca limped into the clearing, leading the remaining battered teams, the scene was already nightmarish. That pitch-black, hideous figure sat high atop the stone door, as if he'd been waiting for them. The forest around him looked ravaged by something unmatched and terrible. Broken branches and trunks lay scattered, several thick trees snapped in half with jagged splinters exposed. The air carried the scent of wood shavings and a more primitive, oppressive pressure. "Yo, the lost little lambs finally found the slaughterhouse?" Vic greeted them from above, his tone light as a cruel nursery rhyme. He picked up a broken log, the width of a bowl, and with one hand wrapped around it, he flexed. With a sickening creak and a spray of chips, the log tore and reshaped beneath his grip. In a blink, it had become a wooden javelin with a dangerously sharp tip, glinting with a cold light. "New game rules," he announced, grinning with rows of sharp teeth, his voice echoing through the clearing with playful madness. "Do you see these lovely little flags in front of you? Pull out your flag, with my enthusiastic help." His white eyes swept over the faces below, each expression frozen in fear. He added, mockingly magnanimous, "Don't worry, guys. I'll show some mercy. You definitely won't die." The arm holding the javelin moved before he finished. The wooden spear blurred into a black streak, whistling through the air faster than the eye could follow. Crack! It punched through a trunk as thick as a grown man's thigh, as if it were paper, then shoved on into another larger tree behind it, the shaft vibrating. "But it'll probably hurt for a few days," Vic finished slowly. Silence fell. Contestants went pale, some reaching for their arms and thighs as if they could already feel the pain. Mercy, apparently. "Ah, sorry," Vic said, feigning sheepishness as he scratched his head with a massive claw. "I'm a bit out of practice. Usually when I work, I go for the kill. I misjudged my strength for a moment." The hollow apology only deepened their terror. He leapt down from the stone door. His landing made the ground tremble. He looked at the trembling lambs who had almost lost the will to fight. His white eyes narrowed to delighted slits and a low sandpaper laugh scraped out of him. "Oh, scared already?" His voice took on a sing-song quality, each syllable laced with mockery. "Look at you, the elite of Nevermore, the future pillars of the supernatural world, scared out of your wits by a few little sticks?" He spread enormous claws in exaggerated helplessness. "This is milder than the games I played as a kid. At least, no one's missing an arm or leg yet, or had their head blown open, right?" He licked his fangs as if remembering something beautiful. Then his tone turned even lighter and crueler. "Think about it. What a rare experience. Free of charge, an adrenaline rush, an extreme survival challenge. When you go back, you can brag, 'Hey, I survived the javelins of that monster,' guaranteed to attract girls or boys." He chuckled at his own dark joke, then let his voice drop to a snake-like hiss as his body leaned forward, the pressure from him palpable. "Or," he paused, "would you prefer to turn around and show me your backs? Let me see if I can skewer 2 or 3 at once? Like a kebab? That would be far more spectacular, more educational, don't you think?" He let his gaze linger on their frozen faces as if admiring a masterpiece. "The choice is yours, cuties." He straightened and adopted his most relaxed, cheerful tone, as though suggesting a movie. "Either stay and play this game that hurts a bit, but most likely won't kill you, and try to take your little flags while you're at it, or run now and bet on whether my javelin is faster than your legs, and on how much longer my merciful patience will last. Come on." He threw his arms wide, his voice climbing in manic invitation and undeniable threat. "Let me hear your screams. Let me see your struggles. This is the most beautiful battle song. The best part. Don't disappoint me." Bianca stared at Vic, then at her yellow team flag within reach. Shame and anger finally overrode fear. She let out a fierce cry. "For the gold bugs." She threw herself forward, first to charge toward the cluster of flags. Her movement was the call to arms. The other contestants followed, eyes wild and howling as they surged ahead. "That's more like it," Vic laughed in satisfaction. He spun, and with a wave of his claws, several more wooden javelins materialized by his side. "The trial begins. Have fun, guys." The whistling filled the air again. 27, Dark Ballet and the Pure White Key. Nevermore Academy truly bred the elite of the elite. Under Vic's merciful rain of javelins, an ordinary person would have been pinned like a hedgehog and crying for their parents as they crawled away from the competition. These contestants, by contrast, though dust-coated, clothes torn, sporting scrapes and bruises, and moving with a desperate, ragged energy, still dodged and weaved through the whistling wooden spears and charged forward with triumphant roars. The werewolves' agility let them sense danger and slip aside. The exceptionally flexible contestants could twist into contortions that seemed impossible. Descendants of the Gorgons and others had their own life-saving tricks. But what surprised Vic most, and dazzled him, was Wednesday, who had slipped into the fray quietly at some unknown point. Her constitution was no different from an ordinary human's. She had none of the superhuman speed, none of the limberness, none of the peculiar powers of the other races. What she had was exquisite technique, a mind calm to a razor's edge, and an uncanny knack for predicting deadly trajectories. Her performance was nothing short of art. In that storm of spears, Wednesday didn't look like someone fleeing for her life. She looked like a dancer in a lethal, elegant, dark ballet. Every sidestep, every spin, every perfectly timed duck or backward lean let those javelins, capable of piercing tree trunks, whiz past her by millimeters. She bloomed and closed like a night-blooming flower, her face revealing no fear, only a focused, frosty composure, as if she were taking an afternoon stroll through her own gloomy garden. Vic, possessed by the black symbiote, watched with huge white eyes, thrilled the way someone unearths a new toy. He raised the stakes. His throws quickened, the angles grew nastier. He even began to play with predictive blocking, sending spears that zipped past Wednesday's throat, waist, and ankles. The sight made the other contestants' hearts skip. They were grateful the monster's primary interest seemed elsewhere. Wednesday did not disappoint. Her movements stayed as fluid as water, and as the attacks tightened, she found an even more extreme rhythm. Not only did she dodge flawlessly, but between evasive moves, she plucked a spear deeply sunk in the ground, and without looking, flipped it back at Vic on top of the stone gate with a casual backhand. The javelin whistled true toward where his cheek might be. Vic looked genuinely surprised and instinctively tilted his head. The spear merely grazed his viscous black surface. It left no wound, but the way his head snapped aside had an oddly comic quality. A hush fell. Vic straightened slowly, blinking those vast white eyes, then let out a low, delighted laugh that sounded like sand grinding together. "Beautiful," he purred, baring sharp teeth. His praise was unabashed and curious. "God, she really is charming, isn't she?" he murmured, a remark both to the symbiote and to himself. Wednesday was the first to break through the javelin curtain and reach the Black Cat team's flag. Without hesitation, she grabbed the pole and pulled. The flag unfurled, the fierce claw marks on its fabric snapping as if alive. When her free hand braced against the ancient crest and stone gate, a sudden change seized her. A familiar, suffocating buzzing engulfed her senses. The scene fragmented, collapsed. The blinding white gave way, and Wednesday found herself in a void of pure, endless white. A figure stood before her, a girl with the same silhouette and features as Wednesday, as if a mirror had taken flesh, but wholly other. Her hair was silver white like moonlight. Her old-fashioned dress was spotless and flowed like frozen clouds. She carried a heavy book whose cover bore no words yet radiated age. Her eyes were the same dark color as Wednesday's, but hollow, like a universe that swallowed light. The girl looked up, and though her lips did not move, a cold, otherworldly voice echoed directly inside Wednesday's mind from a place at the end of time. "You are the key." The rush of information knocked Wednesday flat. Strength drained from her, the flag slipped from her fingers, and she collapsed onto the grass, unconscious. "Hey!" Vic froze the instant she fell. He leaped down from the gate. The black symbiotic matter withdrew in a quick, ebbing tide to reveal his human shape. He crossed to Wednesday and knelt, checking her carefully. He brushed black hair off her forehead with surprising gentleness. "It seems our Miss Detective has dug up some explosive clues," he said. Around them, contestants remained frozen, confused by the sudden upheaval. "What's going on?" stammered someone from the Crow Swarm team. Did you kill her?" "Shh." Vic put a finger to his lips, smiling with lazy composure. "Don't worry. Miss Wednesday is just asleep. She's probably having an unpleasant dream." He rose and looked around at the still hesitant competitors, offering a kind, almost parental reminder. "Friendly tip to everyone. Before she wakes up, is your time to leave freely." He paused, eyes glittering with mischief. "Of course, it's also the only time you might still have a tiny bit of hope of winning." Those words acted like amnesty. The remaining contestants snapped back to their senses, not pausing to wonder what had happened to Wednesday. They scrambled, yanked out their flags, and sprinted back the way they had come, as if their lives depended on it, not daring to look back. At that moment, they silently prayed that Wednesday Addams would sleep a very, very long time, so they might gain, perhaps, a priceless head start. Vic watched their fleeing backs and chuckled lowly. Then he looked down at the girl on the grass, his expression folding into something deeper and more complicated. When Wednesday snapped her eyes open, her vision was still smeared, and the first thing she saw was Vic's face, absurdly close, so close she could make out his long lashes and the mischievous shine in his eyes. He didn't step back when she woke. If anything, he leaned a few inches nearer, his lips twisting into an altogether charming smile. "Wait, what are you trying to do?" Wednesday's breath caught. She forced down the erratic beating in her ribs, lifted a hand, and jabbed it under his chin, twisting his head aside. Up close, with his whole face exposed, the madness faded and was replaced by a focused, almost tender intensity. In that light, Vic might have passed for a dangerous kind of temptation. In fairy tales, Vic let her push him away, his voice still carrying that annoyingly playful lilt. Doesn't a sleeping princess always need a true love's kiss from her Prince Charming to wake her? First of all, Wednesday said, her voice hoarse like someone pulled out of an ice cellar. She flipped to her feet with a smooth motion and brushed imaginary dust from her clothes. I am not a princess. Second, if your lips touch me, I will demonstrate the difference between sleeping and eternal rest. All right, all right. Vic raised his hands in mock surrender, utterly unrepentant, grinning like a cat that had stolen cream. Your way of waking up is not romantic enough, Miss Wednesday Addams. He switched topics. While you were napping, the other teams took off with their flags ages ago. If we want to win, we need to hurry. Before his words finished, pitch-black symbiotic matter surged up his neck and swallowed him whole, venom coalescing into a hulking shape. The creature regarded Wednesday with giant white eyes. Then, in one smooth motion, a thick, flexible tentacle wrapped around her waist and hoisted her off the ground. She found herself fastened atop Venom's broad, rippling shoulders. Is this posture absolutely necessary? She asked from behind Venom's neck, her tone an icicle even as she shifted to steady herself. Venom craned its massive head and bared rows of sharp teeth, voice a deep, amused rumble. That Vic kid was just shouting in my head, said he'd much rather use a bridal carry. This posture is fine. Wednesday cut him off, fingers closing on the cool, elastic surface of Venom's shoulder. Now go. Fast. Aye, aye, Captain. Venom thundered, and then moved with terrifying speed, its enormous bulk skimming the ground like a streak of black lightning as it headed through the woods toward the lake. Wind whipped past Wednesday's face, trees blurring into green streaks. She squinted, feeling both the raw velocity and a disquieting stir of something she would never admit to, and tamped it down ruthlessly. Like a hurricane of shadow, Venom deposited them at the Black Lake shore and came to a halt beside their canoe. Vic, finally, what happened? Why did you take so long? Enid bounded forward, worry plain on her face. From the water, the other boats, 2 and a few others, had already become small dots, their occupants rowing for their lives. No need to worry, Enid, Vic's voice called from beneath Venom as the creature peeled back and shrank. He sounded as calm and maddeningly casual as ever. Let them race a bit longer. Venom receded fully into Vic. Without that support, Wednesday dropped, only to land squarely in Vic's arms, caught in a textbook bridal carry. See, Vic said, looking down at the suddenly rigid girl in his arms, satisfaction bright in his eyes. I still prefer this posture. Wednesday leaped out of his arms as if scalded, moving with inhuman speed and grounding herself awkwardly for a moment. She faced away from him, setting a chilly command between her teeth. Leave. Now. Her voice held its usual iciness, and her command was absolute, but the slightly rushed pace and the deliberate avoidance of his gaze were small betrayals of the way her pulse had reacted. Vic laughed low and light, then was the first aboard the boat. Aye, aye, Captain. With several tentacles now acting like biological propellers, the 4 shot forward, skimming the lake like an arrow. In no time, they closed the distance to the teams ahead, whose rowers, thinking victory was within reach, were beginning to slow. Oh my, Vic said from the bow, shading his eyes with one hand as if regretting their lead. The speed of the return trip isn't matching the desperate escape earlier. Looks like everyone's gotten a little slack. They need some motivation. He produced a round object, one of those black, ominous balls marked 0 from within Venom's mass. weighing it in his hand with the delighted grin of a child with a new toy. The final carnival game begins now. Then, as if struck by inspiration, he turned toward Enid, who was still rowing hard, and his face lit up. He pulled another identical device free and pressed it into her palm. "Hey, Enid!" His voice could have been inviting someone to toss a ball. "Don't just watch, throw a few yourself." Enid stared at the heavy black object in her hand. Her scalp tingled. She shook her head as if to clear it. No, Vic, I can't. This will cause trouble." "Oh, come on, just try it." Vic leaned in close like an overeager, clingy kid, his shoulder bumping hers. His voice softened into a syrupy, coaxing drawl, his eyes large and pleading. "Please, please, it's so much fun. I'm begging you, baby." The single syllable, baby, worked like a charm. Under that look and that tone, Enid crumpled inward. Her cheeks flushed, her head swam, and she felt light and giddy as if tipsy. "Oh, okay." Dazed, she mimicked Vic and clutched the grenade, finger hooked through the pin without really thinking. Wednesday watched the whole smooth, practiced performance without expression, lips tightening. Vic had taken every advantage, his looks, his acting, his proximity, and used them with dizzying efficiency. 29. Caribbean Carnival on the Black Lake. Enid threw the grenade in a daze. Boom! A thick column of water exploded up at the side of the nearest canoe, drenching the contestants like a summer downpour. The competitors who thought they'd escaped froze for a heartbeat, then erupted into even more piercing screams. "Why do these guys still have grenades? Didn't they say they were all out?" Panic swept the lake. Everyone paddled for their lives, muscles burning. Enid stood rooted to the deck, staring at the scene she'd created, the explosions, the soaring fountains of water, the terrified cries of her opponents. Her heart hammered, but it wasn't the same quick, embarrassed thud she'd felt earlier at Vic's flirtatious baby. This was something deeper, a raw, blood-deep surge, something ancestral and fierce that had been lit aflame. Can I have another one?" she asked, lowering her head. Her voice trembled, hiding whatever wild expression crossed her face. "Of course. Why not, baby?" Vic said with an amused glint, and without hesitation handed her several more grenades. Enid yanked the pins as if finally letting out something she'd been holding in for years. She flung them all in a spray of motion. Bang, bang, bang. One explosion after another stitched the lake with deadly fireworks, sending plumes of water and terror in every direction. Boats that had looked barely afloat before now seemed tiny and pathetic in the face of her barrage. Hearing the amplified, distorted screams and watching people scatter like prey, Enid felt transported back to a primeval place. She no longer felt like the awkward girl who tried too hard to fit in and worried about failing to transform. She felt like an alpha, leading, hunting, rounding up her pack. Childhood legends came rushing back. Alpha wolves didn't need perfect transformations. They needed pure, unfiltered instinct. Her breath came hard and hot. Power moved through her limbs, a pressure demanding release. She stumbled, nearly falling, and a warm, steady hand caught her by the small of her back. "Enid," Vic murmured in her ear, that same encouraging, provocative smile in his voice. "Do what you want most. Now." She snapped her head up. Where Vic's eyes had usually held playful light, something wilder gleamed now. A sound burst from her, a bright, bell-like, feral laugh. One hand shot out and grabbed the jingling bell collar at Vic's throat, yanking him toward her. Before he could fully react, Enid pressed a fierce, decisive kiss to his cheek. It lasted only a second. Then she stepped back, pushed him as if a game were done, and snatched the remaining grenades from his hand as she brushed past. Vic stood stunned, one hand lingering at the cheek she'd just claimed. For the first time, his eyes showed real, disarmed blankness. Wednesday, watching from the stern, barely shifted an expression. Her pupils remained unreadable. Enid, having completed whatever ritual she'd needed, turned and scattered the grenades over the dark water like a goddess casting seeds. Boom, boom, boom. Columns of water shot into the sky and collapsed into spray, a sudden rainstorm on the lake. Through that curtain of water, Enid climbed to the bow of the black cat, standing tall and wild. She raised the black flag with the jagged cat claw, tipped her head back, and unleashed a long, fierce howl. This wasn't the forced, uncertain wolf cry she had used to fit in. It was pure, a howl born from the core of her being, full of power and vitality. The sound struck the werewolf students in the stands like a thrown stone. Their bodies answered before their minds did. One by one, they threw back their heads and howled in response. Even contestants still clinging to their boats felt something stir in them and involuntarily echoed the call. Soon wolf howls rose and fell across Black Lake, weaving into a wild, awe-striking chorus. Principal Larissa Weems watched from the platform, a thin, knowing smile touching her lips. "It seems," she whispered to herself, silver-gray eyes bright, "Sinclair will be able to fully wolf out by the next full moon." A contestant finally broke. "Damn it, I'm done. I quit," he cried, slammed his oar, clapped his hands to his head, and dove into the water. In Nevermore's no-rules competition, jumping ship was the formal concession. His surrender was the first domino. Facing Vic and Wednesday had been terrifying enough. Precise, surgical throws that could ruin you. But Enid's method was chaos incarnate, instinct-guided, wildly inconsistent. One grenade might land far away, a brief reprieve. The next would explode at your hull. That crude face-to-face breath of death and the roaring detonations were enough to send anyone's adrenaline into overdrive. Splat! More oars dropped. Voices crying, "I'm out," and "I concede," rose as boats emptied and contestants leaped for the lake all around the Black Cat, which now looked like the source of a spreading plague. Even the proud Bianca stared at the suddenly barren water, then at the black boat bearing down like a carnival float and the three lunatics aboard. She bit her lip until it stung, then let go of her oar and raised her hands in a stiff, humiliated surrender. There was no hope of victory left. Vic looked over the empty expanse. Their canoe was the only one still moving, and the sight made him grin. Enid stood at the bow, still charged, holding her flag as if leading an invisible pack. Vic stepped forward, straightened the bell collar she'd tugged, and then, much to every spectator's surprise, reached into Venom's writhing, tar-black body. After some rummaging, he produced a well-maintained dark brown violin and bow. He rested the violin on his shoulder, tested a few notes, then shot a mischievous glance at Wednesday. "Hey, Captain, how about some victory BGM? Venom's got a cello too, and it sounds pretty good." Wednesday's eyebrow lifted. The tiny flash of interest in her dark pupils showed that, absurd as it was, the idea appealed to her. She didn't answer, but reached toward Venom. The symbiote cooperated, spitting out a larger, elegantly shaped cello into her hands. She settled the instrument on her knees, took the bow, and together they began to play. The opening bars of "He's a Pirate" burst across Black Lake. Vic's violin wild and untamed, playing the melody with the swagger of an adventurer. Wednesday's cello laying down deep, rhythmic waves like a dark sea. The two timbres braided perfectly, interpreting the classic with a strange Nevermore twist, charmingly mad and delightfully sinister. Just as the music hit a daring high, Enid produced the pink, rhinestone-studded Desert Eagle Vic had given her and aimed it skyward. Bang, bang, bang! The sharp gunshots punctuated the melody like percussion, startling and exhilarating. On the stands, teachers and students, even Principal Weems, watched the surreal procession, a pitch-black canoe like a ghost ship, carrying a Gothic girl playing cello, a manic boy on violin, a werewolf girl waving a flag and firing into the air, and a black symbiote writhing in time. For a few suspended seconds, everyone was frozen, then the crowd erupted. A roar of cheers and whistles, louder than all the explosions, crashed over the lake until the air itself seemed to tremble. "Black cat! Black cat! Black cat!" No one could say who started it, but the unified, adoring chant rolled up into the sky. The contest had been decided. More than that, something else had happened. A legend was born. 30. 2 snaps of the fingers, 1 hook punch. 2 snaps of the fingers, 1 hook punch. The Black Cat squad had secured an overwhelming victory. When Principal Larissa Weems handed the ancient-looking championship trophy to Enid, the little wolf girl practically squealed. She threw her arms around Vic's neck and laughed like she'd burst into sunshine, her face bright with plain, bubbling joy. Principal Weems had meant to follow tradition with a closing speech about friendship, perseverance, and the extraordinary qualities our students show, but the words stuck in her throat. She kept seeing the explosion on the lake, a blast that had looked like the Normandy landings, boats sheaving in half, and the grinning culprit standing in front of her. What exactly did any of that demonstrate? Exceptional battlefield survival skills? Top-tier counterterrorism? She cleared her throat, let her gaze sweep the field, and finally fixed Vic with a calm, authoritative stare. In light of certain special circumstances that occurred during this year's competition, she said, the phrase carefully emphasized, to ensure the safety and sustainability of future events, I hereby announce 2 new rules starting with the next Poe Cup. First, the use of any firearms or high-yield explosives is strictly prohibited. Second, her eyes pinned Vic like an icicle. Mr. Victor Black, you are permanently banned from competing. What? This is a dictatorship, tyranny. You can't stifle innovation. Vic leapt to his feet in theatrical outrage, face contorted into mock anguish. Principal Weems raised an eyebrow and spoke almost kindly. Also, Mr. Black, I am very interested in those environmentally friendly, harmless little toys of yours. Please submit a research paper of no fewer than 50,000 words detailing their safety and environmental friendliness. If the paper fails to meet standards, she allowed the smallest smile, you will rewrite it until I am satisfied. Vic froze as if struck by lightning. He hadn't had time to process the blow before he launched into a stirring plea to the crowd, the beginning of his inevitable tavern speech against tyranny. I don't think the world should be like this, everyone. Are you going to stand by while our freedoms are eroded? Today they ban me and my toys. Tomorrow. Enid's quick hand clapped over his mouth, stifling whatever more explosive rhetoric he'd planned. She dragged the muffled, protesting Vic away with an embarrassed smile for the principal. A pity, said Wednesday beside them, expressionless. I was oddly looking forward to his speech. Contestants who had survived the mayhem felt a distinctly gleeful relief. It wasn't pettiness, it was survival instinct. Vic had been a menace. Who could forget the grenades? Swimming to shore, gasping for breath, Vic had remotely deployed a motorized wooden crocodile head that silently paddled toward them. The psychological damage from that phantom crocodile had been worse than the blasts. The post-race celebration took place on the grassy shore. Food, drink, laughter, and a festival atmosphere fueled by the relief of having survived. Enid clung to Vic's arm for most of the night, as if afraid he might otherwise wander off and detonate something spectacular. After the chaos on Black Lake, she'd grown bolder, but even so, holding his arm and feeling the warmth of him made her heart pound like a frantic drum. She felt a secret regret, too. Why, in that moment on the lake, had she only kissed his cheek? Why hadn't she been bolder? Wednesday stayed away from the noisy crowd. The smiles, greetings, encouragement, and even awe directed at her made her skittish. She walked to a quieter corner of campus and sat beneath a bronze statue of Edgar Allan Poe. A cool breeze slid past, but her mood didn't lighten. Images of the Black Lake kept replaying. The instant Enid grabbed Vic's bell collar and kissed him, a strange, cold, stinging sensation like invisible claws tightened around her chest. Something complex, dark, and entirely new unfurled in her, unfamiliar and unsettling. Perhaps she would note it to that inept psychiatrist at her next counseling. She idly looked up at the Poe statue. The author cradled a symbolic book. At once, Wednesday's pupils narrowed, stray thoughts sharpened into focus. Carved on the book's cover was the mark she'd been hunting for, the nightshade emblem. She'd traced a purple book with that symbol in a vision and had scoured the school for days, learning from teacher Sansel only that the mark belonged to the long-defunct secret society called the Nightshades. She had not expected to find the clue standing here, so quiet and public, waiting for anyone who actually knew its meaning. Cold excitement replaced her jumble of emotions. The corner of Wednesday's mouth curled into a slow, predatory smile. The game had entered a new phase. Poe was famous for riddles. She peered at the small engraved lines on the book, an obscure puzzle, the opposite of moon, the world between us, the 2 months before June, the flower that sows itself, one more than one, branches weep to the ground, melts in the sun, cannot find the start or the end. Every rule has one. Wednesday's lips twitched. This wasn't one riddle but several, each line independent. Her mind, a precision codebreaker, worked quickly. The opposite of moon, sun, the world between us, nether, the 2 months before June, April, the flower that sows itself, pansy, one more than one, two, branches weep to the ground, willow, melts in the sun, ice, cannot find the start or the end, oh, every rule has one, exception. She pulled the first letters together in her head. SNAPTWI, snap twice. Wednesday's satisfied, cold smile barely formed before a voice cut through the evening like a badly tuned opera. Wednesday, Queen, Captain, come to the celebration. There's delicious chocolate cake. Vic's drawled, exaggerated enthusiasm made Wednesday's eyelid twitch. A celebration? Cake? And Vic? Those three words together felt like a prediction of disaster. She'd rather endure the absurd blush of that vision compare than go to a cloyingly sweet, headache-inducing party. Her feet stopped as if pricked by a needle. She slapped an imaginary forehead at her subconscious's unhelpful comparison. Kiss Vic? Ugh. She shook her head violently to banish the ridiculous image. Found you, Captain? The voice was right behind her. Suddenly, Vic was hanging upside down from the statue's shoulder, hair dangling, grinning face suddenly inches from Wednesday's. The scent of lingering chocolate wafted off him. The shock, and perhaps the residual shame of that phantom image, blanked her mind for a fraction of a second. Before reason could act, her body, trained for defensive reflexes, reacted. A right hook, with a gust of displaced air, connected solidly with Vic's smiling face. Ow! A shrill, delightedly pained scream cut the calm of Nevermore's evening, scattering a flock of crows from the distant trees. 31. Disappointing kidnapping and a familiar sweet scent. Vic sat on the grass, crying and clutching his nose. A faint smear of crimson peeked between his fingers. Enid fussed over him with a handkerchief, her sympathy a mixture of concern and exasperation. Oh, Vic, I do feel bad, but honestly, you brought this on yourself. Vic's eyes were glassy, whether from pain or from earnest tears was impossible to tell, and his voice had a nasal wobble. This isn't the romantic reunion I imagined. I thought Wednesday would at most yell at me, or look at me like I was garbage. He tipped his chin up and did his best Wednesday impersonation. Glassy eyes, a downturned mouth, and a flat, mocking drawl. Stupid, noisy creature, your very existence is an insult to silence. Enid burst into laughter at the ridiculousness. Wednesday's jaw tightened until the knuckles of her fist made a quiet click. Her dark eyes narrowed. She toyed with the idea of giving him another punch for symmetry. Vic, already in full tragic mode, went on between hiccuping breaths. Banned from the race, beat up, and worst of all. He made a grand, melodramatic gasp. I have to write a 50,000-word thesis. 50,000 words on how exploding chocolate balls are environmentally friendly and harmless. Who can even write that? The fake sobbing Vic had started for sympathy suddenly curdled into real despair at the thought of the monstrous essay. His actress mask slipped. Real tears began to fall. He wailed louder, drawing the attention of students nearby. Wednesday felt her scalp prickle with the heat of curious stares. Being gawked at like an exhibit was far worse than enduring 10 recitations of Vic's poetry. She needed to end the public performance then and there. Without ceremony, she reached out and pinched Vic's mouth shut. Fine, she said through her teeth. You win. I'll go to that damned celebration. Now shut up. Vic went instantly silent. With his mouth still pinched, he blinked through tearful eyes and mumbled indistinctly, Rowie, not lying? You won't run off? Wednesday released him and gave him a look that could have frozen fire. I never break my word. Vic's face brightened as if the sun had burst behind a cloud. Tears and a runny nose smeared his cheeks, but he broke into an absurdly wide grin and immediately slapped Enid's hand in a triumphant high five. Yay! Watching them celebrate, it dawned on Wednesday. She'd been set up by a lunatic and a wide-eyed enthusiast working in tandem. The whole so-called victory party was exactly as she had predicted. Sickeningly sweet chocolate cake, cheap unlimited beer, garish balloons, sticky ribbons, and 2 utterly drunk students. By nightfall, she had to exert every ounce of patience to drag the clingy, sloshed pair back to the dorm. Venom, she said, addressing the black puddle attached to Vic like some Gothic pet. Help. A slow head of the symbiote poked out from under Vic's shoulder. Its long tongue lolled. Its eyes were half-lidded. What? So full, chocolate, dizzy. Never mind. Wednesday pressed the oily mass back into Vic's body with an expressionless shove. Go to sleep. 2 drunks were enough to handle without a drunken symbiote complicating things. After some effort, she heaved the pair onto Enid's bed. Her own bed was not to be violated, and irritated, tugged Vic away from Enid and shoved him into his small bed nearer the bathroom. The cramped, sticky scene made her oddly lighter. Satisfied, she left the room. The cool night air helped dispel the cloying sweetness of the celebration. Wednesday exhaled and pushed into the quiet. It was time to follow the clue she had just found. "Snap twice," she whispered, the answer to the riddle slipping from her lips as she looked toward the bronze statue of Edgar Allan Poe standing dark and silent under the moon. 10 minutes later, things had improved and worsened in equal measure, she thought when she came to, bound to a hardwood chair with cold, rough ropes and a blindfold over her eyes. The good news, she had solved the statue riddle. Under the moonlight, she had snapped her fingers twice. A faint mechanical click came from the weathered bronze, and the statue shifted aside, revealing a tight entrance. Inside, a hidden room smelled of old paper and dust. There, exactly as she had hoped, lay an ancient, deep purple book stamped with the elegant, lethal nightshade sigil. Between its pages, she had found another prophetic drawing, the very thing she'd been looking for. The other good news, one she couldn't ignore, was that the secret room had an owner and that she had been captured while trespassing. Kidnapping would terrify most people, but to Wednesday, the uncertainty of being blindfolded and bound felt perversely interesting. She, of all people, enjoyed unusual sensations, the risk, the puzzle. She'd even hoped her captors might display a bit of professionalism to make it more challenging. The bad news crushed that hope. Her kidnappers were not professional psychopaths, but a gaggle of overenthusiastic high school theatricals, led, she soon discovered, by Bianca Barkley. The ropes were crude and amateurish. The knots were laughably simple and failed to cut off circulation. Whoever had put the blindfold on had left it loose enough to slip. They'd opted for cheap Venetian masks, which made the whole thing look less ominous and more like a badly staged prank. She should never have let them remove the masks. A little mystery would have improved the farce. Instead, she recognized each embarrassed, grinning face as soon as the masks came off. Her thoughts returned to an earlier interaction. The day Xavier, the arts and inventor type, who'd tried to recruit her into the Nightshades on her second day, had casually offered her membership. "The Nightshades are elite," he'd said. "Your parents were in it." That line had made her stomach stumble. The idea of joining a social club called the Nightshades, built from bluster and nepotism, had been intolerable. When Xavier and his crew cleared their throats and announced their plan in the secret room, Wednesday had quietly had enough. She'd risen, slipped the non-technical knot she'd untied in 5 minutes, and slapped the nearest masked kidnapper hard enough to send the fellow staggering. The contact made her pause. A sickly sweet, slightly bitter scent, chocolate with a faint tang of fermented alcohol, wafted from under the mask. "Vic," she said, frowning at the recognition. "Surprise," the person chirped, peeling the cheap mask away. Victor Black's face appeared, flushed with drink. His usual manic gleam was softened by drunken days, but a smile, big and stupid and delighted, stretched across his face. 32. Bondage and confession under bright light. "How was it? Not bad, right? I told you this mask fit the vibe. And the cloak, surprisingly good." Victor beamed. Bianca and her accomplices froze, eyes wide, mouths open. They glanced at Victor, then at the empty corner where their supposed guard had been. "You! Why are you here?" Bianca's voice pitched high with shock. "Where's Antonio?" Wednesday's cold stare swept over them. Her voice was sharp as ice. "It seems your bumbling kidnapping not only disgraces the word, you didn't even notice your accomplice getting switched. Your professional standards are impressively low." Don't worry, Vic chirped, waving a hand like a showman to calm the stunned group. "Your friend is sleeping soundly outside, perfectly safe. The only thing to worry about is he might catch a cold. Didn't realize he was wearing nothing but a cloak under there. Honestly, your technique needs work." He shook his head theatrically. "I even went out of my way to provide hemp rope soaked in sesame oil, more durable, harder to struggle out of. And you tie a knot fit for a street magician? Disappointing." He jabbed at their extracurriculars with a grin. "Learn something useful. What have you been doing in this so-called elite social club? Rooftop parties? Forest camping? Occasional midnight skinny dipping in the Black Lake?" As Vic's voice dropped, he suddenly grew earnest, eyes bright with expectation. "Seriously," he said to Bianca and Xavier, "are you recruiting? What about me? These activities are made for me." Wednesday rolled her eyes so hard it could have been audible. She grabbed Vic by the collar and hauled him out of the secret room. He reached back, still yammering, "Think about it. Please, I'm great at livening up the atmosphere. I'll bring snacks. I have top-tier chocolate." Wednesday ignored him and kept dragging. Vic hiccuped and chattered the whole way back, pleading for admission to the nightshades. Only when she gave him a look cold enough to freeze fire did he shut up, making a show of zipping his lips, then quickly unzipping them again amid drunken giggles. Back at the dorm, Wednesday tossed the oversized nuisance onto her bed. Rules about "my bed is sacrosanct" evaporated. The black silk sheets took him in. Vic rolled onto his side, buried his face in the pillow that smelled faintly cool and floral, and sighed. So comfy. 10,000 times better than my cot, like lying on a cloud, a black cloud. Watching him roll about, shamelessly leaving her bed rumpled, Wednesday's fingers tightened until her knuckles cracked. She finally snapped. She lunged onto the bed, pinned him with a knee pressed to his waist. Vic, hazy with drink, let out a silly laugh, a deeper flush creeping across his face as his eyes wandered. "Oh my, this position, Captain, this is inappropriate. I'm not mentally prepared. This is moving too fast." Wednesday said nothing. She produced a length of hemp rope and began efficiently binding his wrists. Vic shivered and tried a pathetic squirm, voice half shy, half hopeful. Actually, I'm not into this. My bottom line is, all right, he hurried, closing his eyes as if surrendering. My bottom line is flexible. Come on, I'm ready." The vein pulsing at Wednesday's temple said she had been suppressing patience for a long time. She finished the knots, hopped off the bed, grabbed the high-intensity desk lamp and flipped it on, a blinding white beam focused on Vic's face. "Oh ho." Vic squinted. "What's this? Interrogation play? Do you want my pin? Though I'll probably only have enough for chocolate." She ignored him and began, cool and ruthless. "First question, how did you know I was here? I'm fairly certain when I left the dorm you were a drunken heap." A moment of clarity crossed Vic's face. He tried a solemn expression, but his drunk state made it look comical. I demand I won't say anything until my lawyer arrives," he mugged for effect. Wednesday went to his bed and, with undisguised disgust, burrowed into his messy blankets. She produced a large bag full of colorful chocolates. Vic's eyes flew open and he began a desperate protest. "Wait, stop. Those chocolates are innocent, ambassadors of peace, symbols of sweetness." Bound like a caterpillar, he writhed. Wednesday calmly tore open an exquisitely wrapped piece and asked, "Ready to talk?" I will not betray my brother, my informant," Vic declared, trying for righteous dignity, though the rope betrayed him. With a flick, the chocolate arced and plopped into the toilet. "No!" Vic screamed. "That was a new Swiss release. Limited edition. I pulled so many strings for a box. I haven't even tasted it." Unfazed, Wednesday pulled out a large ornate bar embossed in gold. "Not that one," Vic croaked, nearly bouncing on the bed. "That's the Charlie's Chocolate Factory 30th Anniversary Golden Ticket Bar. Out of print, there are almost none left. Please, it's art." Wednesday dangled the bar over the toilet. "Decided yet?" Vic's eyes went red and desperate, but he clung to a pose of martyrdom. I will never sell out Thing. That's my principle." At that instant, something stirred inside Vic's hood. A pale, stitched hand burst out. Thing, its thumb and forefinger pinched the side of Vic's neck and waggled fiercely. Vic yelped, "Ow, ow, it hurts! Let go, Thing! We're on the same side!" Wednesday plucked Thing free and held it in her palm as it ranted with furious, rapid sign language. Its fingers blurred. Wednesday watched, translating in her head, then her expression tightened, cold recognition settling around her like frost. Thing stuck up 2 fingers in a walking motion, pointed at Vic, then rubbed thumb and forefinger together. "He paid," Vic protested. "Hey, strictly speaking, it was an advance on labor compensation, and that was its favorite limited edition nail care set, plus a year's supply of honey almond oil. Fair trade." Thing flipped Vic off with bruising enthusiasm. Wednesday ignored the defense and turned to Thing. "You watched me solve the puzzle and enter the secret room. Then you went to notify him?" She jabbed her chin at Vic. Thing nodded and signed quickly. "I thought he was out cold, but when he heard your name, he shot up, shouting, 'The captain needs me.'" Vic wheezed a cough for dramatic effect. "Cough, cough! Thing! Lawyer! I need a lawyer!" Thing kept going, fingers flying. He stumbled to the secret room, knocked out the guard, dragged him into a broom closet, changed into the guard's clothes, and snuck in. He was clumsy as a cat in shoes, nearly got exposed 100 times. Wednesday's gaze, hard and unblinking, slid from Thing to Vic, who tried to shrink into the blankets. "So," she said, steady and dangerous as an approaching storm, "not only did you bribe my hand to spy on me, but you, drunk, interfered with my investigation and broke into a scene I was handling." Vic forced a guilty, innocent grin. If I said I was providing logistical support and tactical coordination, would you believe me?" Wednesday held the golden ticket bar above the toilet again. "No, don't. I'll talk. I confess." Vic babbled like someone caught with his tail in a trap. "Venom and I smelled a faint lab-like scent at Crackstone Crypt in the woods. It was subtle and mixed, but absolutely there." He swallowed, trying to organize his thoughts through the fog of drink. "I figured those bird beak masks weren't after me. Well, I was incidental. Their real target was you. I had to check, make sure." His voice fell away, reddening as he added, quiet and clumsy, "Make sure you were okay." Silence settled for a beat. Thing's fingers hung in mid-gesture, as if savoring the confession. Wednesday watched Vic with an expression that gave nothing away. The lamp's white beam picked out a hard sheen in her dark pupils, making it impossible to see what she was thinking. 33. Cool fragrance and warm breath. Wednesday wanted, by reflex, to lash out at Vic with her usual sharp tongue. But looking at him now, eyes bleary with drink, hair disheveled and yet oddly earnest, her barbs fizzled on her lips. The sensation was unfamiliar and irritating. "You're drunk," she said at last, dryly, as if that explained everything. Vic rolled over and buried his face deeper in Wednesday's black pillow, which carried a faint, cool scent. His words came muffled, nasally, and slow. "Probably." For a moment the room slipped into a different kind of silence than the one Wednesday favored. It wasn't all-consuming. It was heavy with unanswered questions and things left unsaid. Outside, the wind murmured. Inside, Vic's breathing steadied. Wednesday broke the silence, her voice returning to its usual iciness, but edged with a curiosity she carefully tried to hide. "Why do you think I'm their target?" Something in the question tugged at the last threads of his composure. Vic squirmed, trying to sit up. After a few clumsy attempts, he gave up and simply lay on his side, blinking him blurrily at her. "That attack in the woods. I had suspicions." He spoke slowly, as if wrestling an argument through the fog of alcohol. "At first I thought they were after me, but thinking about it, that doesn't fit. They clearly knew Venom's weaknesses and mine, and they brought only one flashbang. That isn't how people who want to exterminate someone operate, so I might have been incidental, not the main target." He stared at Wednesday. Even drunk, his look had a grave seriousness. "Wednesday, you're the target. That monster killed Rowan, but it ignored you. Why?" He answered himself, voice clearing a little. "Because the monster's purpose was to save you, and it was under the plague doctor's control, directly or indirectly, so I reached a conclusion. For some reason, the plague doctors need you for something on you. Until that thing is obtained, you can't be allowed to die." He belched a beer burp and went on, quieter now. "I've been trying to figure out what they want, until today, when I smelled them in the Crackstone Crypt." Vic suddenly struggled to his feet. The ropes that had bound him were loose or gone. Either he'd freed himself earlier, or Wednesday hadn't tied them tightly. He stumbled unsteadily, but moved toward her with an odd, precise purpose. His fingers brushed Wednesday's waist so quickly she felt it like a faint itch. In the next instant, he had the deep purple book with the elegant 4 on the cover in his hand. Wednesday's pupils narrowed. A mix of shock and a thin, hot anger rose in her. She'd hidden that book inside her clothing. How had he managed to move so precisely, so boldly? Vic's face stayed unreadable, as if he had simply picked a book off a table. He flipped it open and found, with dead accuracy, the illustration containing the other 6. "And then, you found this 6. He tapped the left half of the drawing, which showed a pilgrim holding a scepter. "Put together with the other 6, it shows the two of you facing each other in a final confrontation." Joseph Crackstone, Vic's fingertip rested on the pilgrim on the left. "A man who died centuries ago. If the prophecy is true, he'll be resurrected someday and duel you." He looked up, a thread of deduction flickering in his glassy eyes. Bringing him back might be the plague doctor's goal. Sure, someone else could want to resurrect Crackstone too, but the plague doctors are involved. At least they're pushing it forward. About Joseph Crackstone, I don't know much. His head bobbed as he mumbled, then added, all I know is he founded Jericho Town. This weekend is Outreach Day. If you get assigned to Pilgrim World, you might find something connected to him. Having said what he could, Vic's energy surrendered. He swayed and then, softly, his head landed on Wednesday's narrow, straight shoulder. His breathing deepened and evened out. He had fallen asleep. The familiar, infuriatingly strange feeling hit Wednesday again. The weight on her shoulder, the warmth against the fabric, the soft exhalation, her heart skipped in a way she did not like. Instinctively, she clutched at her chest, then, with a sting of almost panicked resolve, reached to push him off. He slumped obediently into the bed without resistance, a few mumbled things escaping him. His arm, though, found the metal headboard and wrapped around it like a vine clinging to a trellis, as if it were a lifeline. Wednesday stood and breathed several deep breaths, forcing the unfamiliar emotion back into the cold compartments where she kept such things. She looked at him, asleep on her bed and hugging her railing, and her brow tightened. "This is my bed," she said flatly, as if delivering an ultimatum to a sleeping man. She stepped forward and grabbed his arm to haul him up, but his grip was ironclad, welded to the headboard by sleep. She pulled until she panted, and he did nothing but grunt in his sleep. In the end, she had to abandon the physical eviction. Her fingers brushed her shoulder where his breath had warmed her clothing. The deduction was surprisingly accurate for someone so drunk, she thought, coolly appraising the value of the information. My sheets can tolerate one contamination as an investment. She cast a disgusted look at Vic's messy little bed near the bathroom and turned away. The only other bed left was Enid's. Luckily, Enid's sheets were relatively plain off-white, dotted with modest golden paw prints, far less garish than the rainbow nightmare Wednesday had feared. She walked over, looked at the sleeping blonde, and ordered, "Enid, move over." Enid mumbled in her sleep and shuffled toward the middle of her bed, leaving a narrow gap. Wednesday slid in without expression, back to Enid, pinning herself on the edge to maximize the distance from the warm, lively space. She closed her eyes and tried to banish the night. The 4, the 6, Vic's slurred revelations, and the discomfiting nearness from her thoughts. Still, Vic's words, "You are their target," and "resurrecting this guy," kept echoing like a chill spell, alongside his hint about Outreach Day and Pilgrim World. It seemed she had a place she was bound to visit this weekend. Night deepened, and the dormitory fell quiet. 3 breaths rose and fell, one on a large black bed, hugging a railing and sleeping soundly, one squeezed to the edge of an off-white bed, keeping a cold barrier, and one, wrapped, in dreams, around a roommate who slept at a low temperature. 34. What are you doing behind my back? When morning sunlight spilled through the gaps in the curtains of the girls' dormitory at Nefermore Academy, Enid woke up groggy, consciousness still thick with sleep. She reached out instinctively and felt herself hugging something cold and soft. Who is this? Why are they in my bed? Her brain, still slow to boot, clicked into place like rusty gears. What happened last night? We won the Poe Cup. There was a celebration. Vic and I got drunk. Who brought us back? Was it Wednesday? She remembers Wednesday flinging Vic and me onto the bed. Wait, if that's true, then the person I'm hugging now is Vic? Realization hit Enid like lightning, and she jolted halfway awake. Heat flooded her cheeks, a wild mix of embarrassment and giddy excitement. Thank you, Wednesday, she thought, silently thrilled. With Vic still asleep, can I? Her eyes half open and vision blurry, she could just make out a dark silhouette beside her. Holding her breath like a thief and feeling unbearably shy, she leaned in to kiss the cheek of the blurred figure. Wednesday woke at that exact moment. She wished she hadn't, and at the same time she was grateful she had. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a pair of lips closing in, and the look on Enid's face full of happy fantasy. Every hair on Wednesday's body rose in alarm. In an instant, she sprang into action. She shoved her hand precisely against Enid's face and pushed her back, voice razor-sharp and unamused. Enid Sinclair, it's not werewolf mating season. Keep your saliva-secreting organs away from me. Now. Immediately. Wake up. Cold, familiar, and cutting, Wednesday's touch and tone put out Enid's romantic daydream like a bucket of ice water. Enid snapped fully awake, deep blue eyes wide. She focused and instantly registered Wednesday sitting in her bed, face twisted in a rare expression of disgust. Wednesday! Enid bounced back, shrinking toward the headboard like a startled rabbit. She clutched her nightgown and, for a panicked second, checked reflexively to make sure everything was where it should be. Why are you in my bed? Wednesday sat up and, expressionless, smoothed the collar of her black nightgown. The corner of her mouth tilted into a mocking half-smile. Because some idiot took my bed. She glanced across the room. Enid followed her gaze and saw Victor Black sprawled out on Wednesday's bed, black silk sheets, one leg hanging off the edge, arms draped over the headboard, snoring slightly. "Vic?" Enid cried, confusion and disappointment warring in her voice. So the person she'd almost kissed wasn't Vic after all. Oh, the mortification. Wednesday didn't bother getting up. She perched on the edge of Enid's bed and checked a vintage watch on her wrist as if she were waiting for something. "What are you doing?" Enid asked, bewildered. "I made a little mechanism for my bed to wake me up when necessary," Wednesday said flatly. "Though normally I don't need such low-level assistance." 3, 2, 1. Wednesday counted silently. A faint whistling split the air from the foot of the bed. A small but precise crossbow bolt shot out from a hidden launcher, tracing a clean line that passed just inches from the bridge of Vic's nose. It thudded into the wooden headboard above him and quivered there. "Awoo!" Vic shot upright with a howl like a wolf, eyes wide and panicked. "What's going on? Enemy attack? Assassination! Venom, get up!" he shouted, groping around as if for a weapon. Venom poked its head out of his collar, bleary. "What's the noise? It's not even dawn. The smell of metal?" Wednesday watched his flailing panic with dead calm. "Do you remember what happened last night? About how you occupied my bed?" she said. Vic clutched his chest and rubbed his temple, trying to pull coherent memories from the fog. "Oh, I think I got drunk last night. My head hurts. I didn't do anything weird, did I? Wait," he frowned. Fragments came back. Being pushed down, a bright desk lamp, the roughness of rope. He paused, reddening. I think I remember. I was pushed down by Wednesday, and then some extremely impressive rope artistry. Click, clack, clack. Enid's head whipped toward Wednesday like a rusty toy. Her face was a tangle of shock, confusion, and wounded betrayal. "You guys," her voice shook. "What did you two do while I was sleeping last night?" Tears pricked at her eyes. "What were you doing behind my back?" Vic, blissfully ignorant of the tension, added with a hint of pride, "Wednesday is incredibly professional. That technique, definitely master level." Wednesday drew a steady breath, the vein at her temple ticking faintly. Her gaze cut cool and surgical across the room to Enid and Vic. "Do I need to tie you up as well, so your brain stops producing these baseless and profoundly stupid delusions, Miss Sinclair?" She took a step closer and her voice turned brisk, clinical. "The matter is unnervingly simple. Black broke into my room while drunk and interfered with my investigation. To secure valid information and stop him from continuing to cause chaos, I used the most efficient interrogation method available, restricting his movements and asking targeted questions. The questioning lasted 17 minutes and focused on his illegal bribery of Thing to monitor me, and on his fragmented memories about a laboratory smell and Joseph Crackston. None of the lurid scenarios playing in your head happened. Do you understand?" Enid blinked, a little stunned by the cold facts. Oh, so that's what happened." But the skepticism in her deep blue eyes betrayed her. Her inner stage had only dimmed, not closed. She still had 100 private scenes running, and Wednesday's explanation had not entirely convinced them all. 35. The realization under madness. "Oh," Vic sighed theatrically from the side, his face the picture of sham disappointment. "How boring. I thought there might be something more interesting in there." Wednesday didn't bother to look back. She turned, picked up her neatly folded, spotless black uniform, and headed for the bathroom. Minutes later, she stepped out fully dressed. Every crease in her uniform carried a surgical, implacable coldness, as if it could cut anything that dared approach. She walked straight to the dorm door, intent on leaving last night's chaos and this morning's nonsense behind. Just as her hand touched the knob, Vic called out again, voice deliberately casual. "Hey, Wednesday." Quick question. After I passed out last night, did I say anything weird? I get mouthy when I'm drunk. Sometimes I blurt stuff I don't even remember. Wednesday's steps faltered for a fraction of a second, that almost too small to notice. Images from last night flashed in her mind. Moonlight, the boy's hazy but serious gaze, the slurred yet blunt, "I have to make sure you're okay." Her fingers tightened on the knob, then relaxed. No. Her answer was short, flat, emotionless. She didn't look back as she opened the door and left, her skirt cutting the air like a final severing of any unfinished conversation. The dorm door clicked shut. Vic and Enid were left staring at each other in an awkward silence. The smirk on Vic's face faded. He rubbed his chin, watching the closed door. He said, thoughtful. Enid, still processing, glanced between the door and Vic. "Did she just pause for a second?" she murmured. Vic didn't answer. He rubbed his temples, still feeling the hangover. A strange mix of awkwardness, curiosity, and a little loss hung in the room. Enid sat on the bed, hugging her knees, pale green eyes fixed on the closed door, then on Vic, who was trying to piece together his memories. "So," she finally asked, voice laced with confusion and a hint of accusation, "what actually happened last night?" Vic stopped rubbing his temples and looked at her. His eyes, normally too bright for comfort, were slightly glassy from the hangover, but that familiar glint of madness was already resurfacing. He cocked his head as if considering a serious matter, tapped his chin, and drawled, "Well, based on the memory fragments I have left, feels like someone smeared them with chocolate sauce." He snapped his fingers, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "As for the process, she bound me. Very professional, very cold, and very impressive. Then she interrogated me for ages under a desk lamp." He shrugged as if discussing breakfast. "Enid, you should have seen it. That technique, tsk." His eyes gleamed with the enthusiasm of a critic. Precise, powerful, fully immobilizing while avoiding major blood vessels and nerves. It even had a sort of stunning, geometric aesthetic. She must have studied it. Maybe she aced anatomy. Enid's expression fell as she listened. She slumped, disappointed but secretly relieved. At least there'd been no awful betrayal. Good enough. She rolled her eyes at Vic, tossed back the covers, and hopped out of bed to wash up. Suddenly, Vic bolted upright. "Wait! Chocolate!" Panic replaced his earlier amusement. "Where's my chocolate? I dreamed she was going to feed it to the toilet." He tore through his messy bed like a frantic insect, upending blankets, pillows, even checking under the bed. "It's not here. It's gone. It's nowhere." His voice cracked. He looked at Enid in near hysterics. "Enid, have you seen my chocolate? The new Swiss ones. The out-of-print golden ticket bars. Are they? He couldn't say the worst aloud. Enid sighed and pointed helplessly toward the head of Wednesday's immaculate bed. "There. Aren't those them?" Vic followed her finger and saw his bag of chocolates sitting on Wednesday's nightstand, arranged even neater than when he'd had it. On top lay the intact, gorgeous Charlie's Chocolate Factory 70th Anniversary Collector's Edition Golden Ticket Bar. Relief hit him like a physical force. He slumped back onto the mattress as if saved from a catastrophe. "Thank God. Thank you, Wednesday, for sparing my life. Looks like she went soft in the end." He crawled over, picked up the bag like a relic, and clutched it to his chest with a ridiculous, grateful grin. Enid rolled her eyes again and went to the bathroom. Vic sat on the edge of the bed, the grin fading into a rare, thoughtful focus. He toyed with the golden ticket wrapper. "Venom," he murmured inwardly, thinking of the symbiote. "Last night, how much did I actually say?" Venom's lazy voice echoed in his head, filled with post-sleep grumbling and disdain. "Ugh, quite a bit. Whining, shouting, you spilled a lot of trade secrets, like where you hide your backup chocolates." Vic went quiet. Venom continued to complain about the mess and even threatened to run off with the Gothic girl because she seemed calmer. Vic ignored the threats and caught the important part. He really had said a lot. The smell of the lab, the real aims of the plague doctors, Joseph Crackstone and the possibility of resurrection, hints about Outreach Day and Pilgrim World. He glanced toward the window, as if he could see through the walls to the Gothic girl walking away alone, carrying more mysteries than she'd shown. A faint, different smile tugged at his mouth, clearer, less mad, with a trace of anticipation. "Pilgrim World, huh?" he whispered, tapping the wrapper. "Sounds like an interesting field trip location." His eyes grew bright again, but now there was calculation beneath the light. I'll have to make some preparations in advance. 36. A resolute skirt and a joyful back view. On outreach day, the sunlight was almost painfully bright, an odd contrast to Nevermore Academy's usual gloom. Students clustered by the gates, chattering as they waited to find out their community service assignments. Vic unfolded the volunteer slip he'd just been handed, brow twitching. Ulius Emporium? He ruffled his perpetually messy black hair. Oh, I remember that place. A dark corner full of moldy antiques and suspicious artifacts. My luck's never been great. He cocked his head and glanced at the Gothic girl nearby, who gave off an unmistakable aura of keep away. When he saw the same volunteer slip in Wednesday's hand, a smug smile spread across his face. Well, looks like Miss Wednesday isn't favored by Lady Luck today either. He shook his slip with obvious mockery. Wednesday didn't even lift her eyelids. Her voice was a shard of ice. I do not rely on fanciful things called luck. It simply said Enid Sinclair was assigned to Pilgrim World. She looked up, her dark pupils emotionless, as if she were merely reciting a fact. I'm going to swap with her. Vic made an exaggerated show of disbelief. I don't think Enid will go for that. She's been talking about the rainbow swirl gummies at Pilgrim World all week. Supposedly you can taste happiness in those candies. He shrugged. But hey, good luck. I'll see if any poor soul wants to trade their delightful antique store duty with me. As he turned toward the crowd, a hand closed on his wrist. The grip wasn't tight, but the touch was ice cold and absolutely resolute, the chill traveling through the fabric to his skin. Wednesday had somehow materialized beside him. She looked up, her stare like two poisoned daggers aimed straight at his teasing eyes. Do not follow me. Her voice was low, every word forced between her teeth. I do not need protection. Put away your clever little tricks, Vic. Then she abruptly shook his hand free, and the hem of her black skirt tracing a decisive arc, walked off toward Enid without once looking back. Vic stood blinking. He rubbed his wrist where her hand had been. The chill seemed to linger. So mean, huh? He muttered to the air, or perhaps to himself. All right. Independent goth queen. The cynical smile faded. For a moment his expression shifted, something complicated passing through his eyes before he masked it with a wider grin. But I believe, he murmured with strange certainty, one day Snow White will remember her prince, even if the prince is a maniac with a terrifying pet. Prince? Venom's voice echoed inside his head, merciless and mocking. Come on, Vic, wake up. In this kind of fairy tale, you're usually the demon king who gets his head cut off by the hero. And honestly, that goth girl is more evil queen than damsel. She doesn't need a poisoned apple. She poisons you with a look. Vic fell silent, temporarily tuning out the unromantic commentator inside him. Across the crowd, Wednesday locked on to Enid, who was animatedly discussing the rainbow swirl gummies with her friends. Enid, Wednesday's voice was a cold stream that instantly dampened the group's cheer. Swap with me. She handed over the Ulius Emporium slip with the same flat finality as an order, leaving no room for negotiation. Enid's smile froze. She stared at the mildew-scented slip as if it were a cursed thing and shook her head like a rattled toy. No way, Wednesday. Ulius Emporium is dark and old and smells weird. I'm going to Pilgrim World to buy rainbow swirl gummies. Wednesday's face remained unchanged, as if anticipating the refusal. She reclaimed the slip and dropped a bombshell in the same flat tone. Fine, then I will stay at Ulius Emporium with Vic. I hear it has many corners, and it is very quiet. She emphasized the word quiet. The air around them went cold. Enid's expression moved from protest to shock to dawning panic, and then to frantic determination. Wait, she nearly screamed, snatching the Ulius Emporium slip back from Wednesday, and with lightning speed shoved her own bright Pilgrim World slip into Wednesday's hand. She nearly tore the paper. Oh, Wednesday, an ancient, mysterious antique shop sounds so attractive, full of historical atmosphere. Enid babbled, cheeks flushed with excitement. And the rainbow swirl gummies are too sweet. Bad for my teeth. I should go soak up the cultural vibe instead. She clutched the swapped slip like a ticket to paradise, eyes shining. Oh, Wednesday. She even wanted to hug her, but froze under Wednesday's cold stare. I love you so much. Today, just today, I feel like I can totally win him over. With that, Enid skipped away like a happy bird, afraid perhaps that Wednesday would change her mind. Wednesday watched her go, then looked down at the Pilgrim World slip in her hand, gaudy cartoon fonts and rainbow patterns. Objective achieved. Perfect. And yet, for reasons she couldn't immediately name, watching Enid's hopeful retreat and hearing that "I can definitely win him over" stirred a faint, inexplicable annoyance in Wednesday. The feeling was foreign and illogical. She quickly blamed it on her habitual disgust for Enid's lovey-dovey foolishness and on the distaste of having used such a childish ruse to get what she wanted. Yes, it must be that. She smoothed the garish slip, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her dress pocket. When she turned her gaze back toward Pilgrim World, she had already regained her absolute calm and focus. The clues to Joseph Crackstone were right there. Vic paced beneath the dim lamps of Ulias Emporium, eyes roaming the shelves with genuine bafflement. A row of perfectly dressed, taxidermied squirrels in tiny gowns and foxes in top hats passed under his gaze, and his face registered nothing but confusion. "Whoa," he muttered to Venom inside him. "Am I just out of touch, or has antique come to mean putting clothes on dead animals? The owner actually said these are best sellers. This aesthetic is very Nevermore." He was about to let Venom sample the vintage flavor of the specimens when the bell above the door jingled. Vic spun around. "Enid?" Surprise lit his features. "Wow, what spell did Wednesday work on you? Last I saw, your notebook was stuffed with rainbow fudge recipes and Pilgrim World check-in maps." Enid's cheeks flamed. She averted her eyes and tugged at the hem of her clothes without thinking. I just felt like getting a bit of history and culture." "Yes, history and culture." Vic raised an exaggerated eyebrow, leaned closer, and lowered his voice with a mischievous grin. "Oh, Miss Sinclair, did you know? Every time you tell a small lie you don't really believe, your little claws can't help but go poof and peek out a bit." "What?" Enid jumped, slamming her hands behind her back and feeling her fingertips, finding no claws. "Just kidding." Vic exploded into laughter, like a fox pleased with a stolen chicken, eyes curved into slits. "Just a little test. Looks like I was right." Enid went redder still, practically smoking. Vic chuckled, and as if it were the most natural thing in the world, slipped his arm around her waist and began to lead her out. "Let's go for a walk. You can't stand being in there. Your mouth droops the moment you hate something, like a kitten who's had its dried fish stolen." His movements were smooth and intimate, as if he'd done this 100 times. The closeness and the low whisper by her ear made Enid's head spin and her heart pound like a trapped rabbit. The certainty in his tone, that he knew her better than she knew herself, made her both shy and oddly delighted. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" the plump proprietor of Ulias Emporium shrieked, stepping forward to block them. "You're volunteers today. The principal specifically told you to." "Oh, respected madam." Vic spun back with a look of sincere alarm and pointed out the window at a ragged figure rounding the corner. "That beggar. He just ran off with that expensive-looking vintage camera from your counter without paying." "My camera." The woman went pale, instantly abandoning her admonishment. "Quick, get it back. That thing's worth a fortune." "Of course, madam. Leave it to us. We'll get it back," Vic said solemnly, still holding Enid, smiling as he backed out. Once outside, Enid scanned the street and whispered, "Which way did he go?" Vic grinned, his arm still settled on her waist, and steered her away from the corner. "Based on my professional sleuthing," he said in mock-serious tones, "he's probably headed to the Weathervane Cafe. We can search carefully there, and while we're at it, order 2 chocolate brownies and 2 signature milkshakes to restore our strength. Chasing thieves is exhausting, right?" Enid caught on instantly, her eyes lighting up. "Oh, of course. Let's go there to, search with all our might. I mean, to perform our mission." They smiled and headed toward the Weathervane, leaving Ulias and its waxy aroma behind. The cafe hit them with the warm scent of syrup, roasted beans, and cream, comfort itself. Vic slid into a window booth like he owned the place and picked up a menu. 2 chocolate lava brownies with extra ice cream and 2 vanilla milkshakes piled high with whipped cream, please. Enid sat across from him, cupping her cool cheeks in a vain attempt to hide the heat in her face. She watched him flip through the menu with bright, unblinking eyes. "So," her voice trembled with a mix of excitement and curiosity, Does this count as doing a secret mission? Of course it does. Vic set the menu down, leaning in like he was drawing up a battle plan. Our mission is to prevent Ulius Emporium's precious goods from leaving Nevermore, especially via fencing networks. The weather vane, according to reliable intelligence, is a known hub. He winked. We'll set up surveillance, lie in wait, and, most importantly, deplete their dessert reserves as a countermeasure. Enid giggled, feeling light and warm. The brownies and milkshakes arrived, and Vic promptly scraped more than half the brownie's ice cream onto Enid's cup without asking. Eat up, he said with a grin. Tracking suspects is hard work. You've been getting skinny training for the Poe Cup, you know. Enid looked down at the suddenly lavish milkshake and felt sweetness bloom inside her. She took tiny bites of brownie, happier than she'd ever been with rainbow fudge from Pilgrim World. Vic, she said between mouthfuls, suddenly serious, what about your 50,000-word thesis? The principal sounded really strict about that. Vic's smile froze as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over him. He set down his fork with exaggerated slow-motion solemnity, heaved a dramatic sigh, and slumped against the sofa as if his spine had vanished. Oh, the thesis, he groaned, voice thick with despair. That 50,000-word academic torment, anti-human and anti-common sense, where I have to prove that exploding chocolate balls are environmentally friendly and harmless. He sat bolt upright, clutching his messy hair with both hands, face contorted. 50,000 words. Just thinking about it gives me a headache. It's worse than being forced to eat licorice chocolate for a week. Enid couldn't help it. She burst into sympathetic laughter, covering her mouth, her blue eyes glinting with amusement. Then Vic snapped back to life. He slammed a hand on the table, startling her, and his face lit up with that manic, brilliant grin. But behind every impossible problem is a crazier solution waiting to be discovered. He leaned in, voice dropping conspiratorially. And I've already thought of a brilliant plan. What plan? Enid asked, swept up in his enthusiasm, leaning forward. Since the principal requires a thesis, Vic winked, there's no rule saying it has to be written by me. He wagged a triumphant finger. So I'm going to outsource it. Outsource? Enid blinked. You can outsource a thesis? To whom? The senior students? I doubt anyone would want to tackle a topic like that. Broaden your horizons, my dear Enid. Vic snapped his fingers, grinning. Senior students are too ordinary. I'm aiming higher, a professional, someone who knows explosives chemistry, moonlights as a ghostwriter, and guarantees the paper will pass plagiarism checks. The perfect fit. A cold bead of sweat rolled down Enid's forehead. That sounds extremely professional. Is he trustworthy? Who is he? 38. I'll give you half. I'm a professional, of course. Venom poked its head out. It was wearing a very scholarly pair of glasses and used a tentacle to hold a pen over a sheet of A4. The big white eyes behind the lenses glittered with uncanny seriousness. As long as the budget's there, never mind a 50,000-word thesis. Tell me to translate the environmental feasibility report on chocolate explosives into ancient Greek and set it as a sonnet. I'll do it. Was that really not a problem? Enid watched the black, gooey symbiote that had been shrieking and thrashing with Vic a moment ago, now sitting like a tenured professor, and wondered whether she'd gone mad or the world had. Vic, of course, was beaming with pride. Don't worry, he said, thumping his chest. Venom is fluent in academic jargon. It'll produce something so flawless, even Nobel judges would be stumped. His face shifted into an exaggerated, mournful expression. As payment, I gave Venom 70% of this month's chocolate quota, and that golden ticket collector's edition, thinking about it, breaks my heart. Wah, Enid, my heart! Vic grabbed her hand and looked at her with dew-eyed sorrow, like a dog whose favorite bone had been stolen. 70%! How many limited edition bars is that? That golden ticket, I used to sleep with it. Enid stared at the absurd tableau, a melodramatic boy clinging to her hand, the black symbiote adjusting its glasses and scribbling Latin-sounding phrases on paper so fast the pen tip sparked. Finally, she realized something. Wait, Venom's writing your thesis. Doesn't that mean you're essentially outsourcing it? Of course not, Vic snapped, suddenly solemn as if discussing academic ethics. Completely different. Venom is an independent individual with its own thought patterns and knowledge base. I'm just providing a creative platform and the funding. To prove his point, He nodded to Venom. Use an Aristotelian syllogism to argue that chocolate explosions are environmentally friendly. Without looking up its tentacles flying, Venom intoned in a low, professorial voice. Major premise: all cocoa products originate from natural plants. Minor premise: an explosion is a rapid oxidation reaction. Conclusion: therefore, a chocolate explosion constitutes a green form of sustainable energy release. It pushed its glasses up with a tentacle. Want references? I can cite at least 5 papers from Nature, though I made them up. The plagiarism checker won't catch them. Vic turned to Enid triumphantly. See? Independent thought. Professional outsourcing. Enid opened her mouth to say blatant cheating, but froze at Vic's smug, self-satisfied look and Venom's perfect scholar routine. Maybe in this crazy world, that actually counted as normal. She surrendered with a sigh. Okay, when will the thesis be done? Venom didn't slow. One tentacle made a wait gesture, while the others darted across the page, letters and formulas flowing like ink through a stream. Chemical structures and citation notes filled the margins. Basically, Venom said without looking up, give me 3 minutes to finish the discussion, 2 minutes to check the citations, and 1 more to make it read like it survived a lifetime of research. It abruptly stopped and pointed at a paragraph. This needs experimental data. Vic, invent some plausible but unverifiable numbers. Vic leaned in, peering at the page with mock gravity. Explosive yield equivalent to 0.37 standard chocolate energy units, residue biodegradability 99.8%, and put verified by experiment, see supplementary materials. No one's going to check. Perfect. Venom wrote with satisfaction. Enid watched the duo and felt a flash of sympathy for Principal Larissa. There was no way she could imagine a thesis being produced like this. 3 minutes later, Venom set the pen down, arranged 12 densely packed pages, and, because even fake academia needs finishing touches, pulled out a stapler and clicked it shut. Done. It handed the stapled paper to Vic, slid the glasses off, and reverted to its usual grubby, whining self. I'll take that 70% of your chocolate tonight. Now hand over the collector's edition. I know you've got it. Vic produced the limited edition, glitter-wrapped bar from his pocket like a man bidding farewell to a beloved. Here, the golden ticket collector's edition we agreed on. Venom snatched it and withdrew into Vic, a contented purr echoing inside his head. Vic looked at Enid with misty eyes. Enid, I'm in a financial crisis. For at least 2 weeks, I might not eat a single piece of chocolate. For Victor Black, that was practically apocalypse-level news. He stared at the half-eaten brownie on his plate as if it were a lost lover and carefully dabbed the last smear of chocolate sauce with his fingertip, licking it as if savoring a final memory. Enid found his performance funny at first, then something in her chest melted. She rummaged through her paw-print tote and produced several beautifully wrapped chocolate bars, clearly not cheap, and thrust them into his hands. Here, take these, she said, cheeks warm. I always keep extras. Vic gaped at the sudden bounty like a starving man presented with bread. Enid, you're my angel, my savior, my chocolate goddess. He almost leapt up, then held himself back and hugged the bars like a tender, grateful lunatic. I'm alive again, he muttered, tearing into a wrapper and taking a blissful, audible bite. Watching him, Enid felt a sweetness that had nothing to do with sugar. She propped her chin on her hand and smiled. It's okay. From now on, I'll share half my chocolate with you. Vic froze mid-chew. He looked up at her, the blonde girl with the easy smile, and the words landed on him like a pebble on calm water, making a small, strange ripple. This wasn't the feverish, destructive pull he felt toward Wednesday, the hungry, chaotic need to tear everything apart together. It was warm and gentle, and it left him slightly off balance. He didn't crack a joke. He didn't perform. He just looked at her, and then, slowly and deliberately, a real smile spread across his face, clean, unmocking, unexpectedly sincere. Thanks, Enid, he said in a softer voice than she was used to. You're really good. Under the cafeteria lights, the madman let his mask slip for a second, and the reward was a smile more delicious than any chocolate. Enid felt it hit her like a little skip in her chest. This is on me. Xavier, who was volunteering at the weather vane, walked over with 2 desserts and set them on the table, breaking the uneasy little moment between Vic and Enid. Thanks. Vic's eyes lit up as he grabbed one and, for the moment, forgot his earlier financial crisis. Xavier smiled and sat down opposite him. I should be the one thanking you. Tyler looked like he was going to melt when he saw you. He ducked into the kitchen the moment he saw you coming. Being around that guy makes me really uncomfortable. Tyler? Vic shoved a generous spoonful of brownie into his mouth, repeating the name in a muffled way before he remembered. Ah, Tyler Galpin, that limited edition chocolate. No wonder I could smell him but couldn't see him. Did he bully you? Xavier scratched his head awkwardly. My gift leans toward prophetic dreams. I'm not great in actual fights. If my ability were more like Rowan's, I'd definitely give him a good lesson. There was a trace of frustration in his voice. Vic's face softened into a sympathetic grin. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if passing along a secret tactic. Teaching someone a lesson doesn't always require powers. Buddy, how much cash have you got? I have. No thanks. I don't need any weapons. Xavier cut him off, face saying it plainly. Vic deflated like a punctured balloon, then perked up again. How did you know I was going to sell or recommend self-defense gear? Prophetic dream? No, Xavier said with a helpless smile. I've just gotten to know your character. After the Poe Cup and the lake incident, nobody at school was ignorant of Victor Black's favored way of solving problems. Vic put on a faux offended expression. Another person who doesn't get Mr. Black. Xavier, you're too young to understand the ultimate aesthetics and spiritual solace of precise mechanical design, the cold touch of metal, the perfectly balanced recoil. He spread his arms like he was cradling an invisible Barrett rifle. It's a language, a philosophy, a behavior that would get you expelled and probably sent to juvie if the cops found out. Xavier finished calmly, shutting the conversation down. He nodded toward the counter. I should get back to washing cups. He practically fled the scene of the dangerous sales pitch. Vic watched him go, shrugged theatrically, and turned back to Enid, spreading his hands. See, this is where art appreciation stops. It's so hard to find a true kindred spirit. Enid giggled. The Weathervane's bell chimed as the door opened. Wednesday stood framed by the afternoon light, a cold silhouette at odds with the cafe's warm, sugary air. Wednesday, over here. Vic's face lit up and he waved, his smile bright enough to try and push back her chill. Wednesday paused when she saw him and Enid together. Her expression tightened for a heartbeat. She remembered how, the last time she had left Pilgrim World, she'd found herself inside Dr. Kinbot's psychiatric clinic. Miss Addams, today isn't a scheduled counseling day, Dr. Kinbot had said, glancing toward the door as if someone might be following Wednesday in. Don't worry, Vic didn't follow me, Wednesday answered cold. Dr. Kinbot visibly relaxed. Vic put an unusual amount of pressure on her. He always had that knack for smilingly and without malice, probing every sore spot of her failed relationships and career. That Vic is almost always with you, she said. How rare. It's that we both happen to need counseling, Wednesday replied, voice like frost. In calm, clinical terms, she listed symptoms to Dr. Kinbot: irregular heartbeats, elevated body temperature, and unfamiliar agitation when confronting a particular person. Dr. Kinbot thought a moment. Miss Addams, it sounds like you might be falling for someone, or at least developing strong feelings. Is it Vic? No, Wednesday said, voice thin and cold. I made a mistake. She turned to go. I shouldn't consult someone who can't clean up the wreckage of her own emotions. It's like asking a blind person to appreciate the symmetry of Gothic architecture. Your diagnostic skills, she added over her shoulder, her peripheral glance as sharp as a blade, are as short-lived as your romances. The words landed like a scalpel. Dr. Kinbot's face twitched, but she didn't snap or blush. Years of sparring with Vic had toughened her threshold. Vic had once given her a meticulous list of 17 cowardly biological and sociological instincts that could explain why an ex had cheated. Compared to that, Wednesday's cruelty felt almost gentle. When Wednesday's hand was on the doorknob, Dr. Kinbot called out, pulled a slightly dusty book from a top shelf, and held it up. Maybe you should look at this. Analysis of Youth Romantic Psychology. Wednesday looked at the book with something like contempt. It's more reliable than someone who can't clean up their own emotional wreckage, isn't it? Kinbot half mocked. Wednesday hesitated, weighing the book like poison against an antidote. Then she turned, snatched it, slapped a $10 bill on the table, and left without looking back. Dr. Kinbot pinched the 10 and watched Wednesday leave. She smiled. Well, a $5 profit, she mused, shaking her head. Vic and Wednesday, a perfect match. The memory folded back into the present. Skipped a shift at Pilgrim World? Vic leaned in, curious, eyes twinkling with that mad light of his. Any discoveries? Got any clues? Wednesday shifted the small bag containing the book in her bag a little closer, keeping it out of Vic's line of sight. She cut straight to the point, voice cold. Do you know where Joseph Crackston's old meeting place is? What meeting place? Vic looked blank, spreading his hands in exaggerated innocence. You know, I'm not a local. For a centuries-old stronghold like that, you have to ask the families who've been here for generations. Right. Satisfied, Wednesday stopped looking at him and went to the counter. As she passed, she set a small bag on the table in front of Enid. Oh, rainbow swirl gummies from Pilgrim World, Enid exclaimed, opening the bag with a squeal. Wednesday, you remembered. Thank you. Is there one for me? Vic leaned over, eyes bright, hand reaching toward the bulging little bag to see if any other treats hid inside. Wednesday sidestepped with feline ease, giving him a look sharp enough to make a Cerberus tuck its tail. Vic withdrew his hand sheepishly, pouting like a big dog whose favorite toy had been taken, and turned to sulk at Enid instead. 40. You've been fired, Enid. Vic's voice trailed off, pleading. Just one, please. I want to taste what that legendary flavor of happiness feels like. Seeing him like that made Enid laugh. Her cheeks flushed as she picked up a gummy, hesitated, then held it to his lips. Here, she said, for you. Vic opened his mouth eagerly. His tongue brushed Enid's fingertip, and she recoiled as if electrocuted. Her face went bright red. Vic seemed oblivious, eyes half closed as he savored the candy. A little cloying, but not bad, he murmured. By the way, Wednesday, what exactly did you find? Wednesday ignored him. She also ignored Xavier, who nodded a greeting and pressed the call bell on the counter. Tyler appeared from the kitchen almost immediately, his movements sharp with a taut energy. That's not fair, Vic hissed to Enid, genuinely aggrieved. Says, why does he disappear when he sees me but pops up the moment Wednesday's here? I look way friendlier than she does. Vic, Enid said cautiously, a little sympathetic. Did you or Venom do something to him? How could we? Vic's eyes widened, injured. Venom and I are very civil. Last time Venom even asked him politely if he could have a little taste. We said please. Enid silently backed off, a look of I knew it on her face. Okay, mystery solved. On the other side of the counter, Wednesday had pulled out a map of Jericho and spread it flat. Her voice was flat and precise. Joseph Crackstone's estate, specific location. Tyler swallowed, fingers trembling as they traced the map before finally pointing to a blotch deep in a dense forest. It's here. Only the foundation and some rubble are left now. It's remote, hard to get to. Wednesday rolled the map up, shoved it into her bag, and pivoted to go without hesitation. Hey, Wednesday! Vic snatched up the untouched dessert, a towering mound of whipped cream, and chased after her. Don't go so fast. Have some dessert. Relax first. Get some sugar so we'll have the energy to go together later. She didn't slow. Her answer came back cold and hard as ice. No need. I'll go alone. You two, continue your date. Those words worked like a spell. Enid's face flushed. Butterflies exploded in her chest, and she nearly whimpered with joy. Best friend. God-tier wingman. I love you. Vic's smile froze. The manic gleam in his eyes vanished, replaced by a look of incredulous alarm, as if he'd just heard that global chocolate production had ceased. He practically lunged into Wednesday's path and blocked her. His voice climbed with panic, cracking on the edges. Are you kidding me? After my analysis last night, that those plague doctors might be targeting you, that Joseph Crackstone, who's been dead for centuries, might be about to be resurrected. You're telling me you'll go alone into a pitch-black, God-forsaken forest to find some ruins? He waved his arms like a conductor of catastrophe. You're ticking off every first-to-die trope from every horror film ever made. You're practically supplying them a perfect, isolated target with a tragic soundtrack. Do you think those things lurking in the shadows won't adore the chance to find someone like you out there, Wednesday? Wednesday looked at him. Her pupils were unmoved black holes, and her reply was a scalpel. Analysis? She repeated, light but sharp. You mean those fragmented, unsubstantiated, drunken ramblings from last night, spun from alcohol and delusion? Her gaze flicked over his flushed face. A faint, mocking curl touched her mouth. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Black, but my actions do not need to be based on your possibilities and conjectures, nor do I need an advisor who cannot control his own emotions and who relies on alcohol and other crutches to escape reality. The words struck a nerve in the place he least wanted touched. Vic paled. Pain flickered in his eyes, then boiled over into a raw, angrier fear. Oh, yeah, I am crazy. I do rely on alcohol and Venom. He took a step forward, almost on her, his voice ragged. But that's because I've seen with my own eyes what those plague doctors do in their labs. I can smell them, the cold, rotting, inhuman stench of science. He gripped his own arm until his knuckles whitened. And you, all you do is clutch your old paintings and rely on logic. You think that's enough, that you can handle them with a few historical references. They don't follow the rules you imagine. They are. What they are is none of your concern, Wednesday interrupted, unmoved. What has your personal experience given you besides PTSD and a mountain of fear you have to suppress with external substances? Loss of control? Madness? Or this? Her eyes flicked to his trembling hand. This useless emotional overreaction? I'm overreacting. Vic acted as though she'd said something absurd. He threw up his hands and gave a short, bitter laugh. Yes, I'm overreacting, because I don't want to see you become the next me. Targeted by them, torn apart by them, turned into something they want. 3 years, 7 months, and 13 days. I remember it. They dismantled me again and again, then sewed me back together until I was a freak. Do you want that? Huh? His voice was edged with a kind of desperate, burning fear, real, not performative. Wednesday's voice stayed steady, colder than the air between them, each word like a dropped icicle. I do not need your protection, and I certainly do not need you to project your trauma and fears onto my investigation. Your help, Mr. Black, does nothing but create problems and add uncontrolled variables. She lifted her chin slightly. Her dark eyes were like bottomless wells reflecting his current agitation and, to her, pathetic state. Your emotional instability, your unpredictable behavior, and that tiresome tendency to drag everyone into your chaos. She paused, delivering the final frostbitten verdict. Watson, she said, utterly devoid of feeling yet with the authority to end things, you're fired.